Chapter 187. Yugalu continued, I heard that the bull went for Enril, and if it wasn't for Murin blocking in front, he might have knocked Enril over. It's a pity that I didn't experience that battle, what a pity. Giraffe grabbed the jug of wine and drank it heartily. There's nothing to regret, I'd rather not have experienced it, I'm lucky not to have been on the battlefield. Otherwise, it would have been the bull who rushed at the front, and we wouldn't be able to sit and drink together today. Today, we shouldn't resent Murin anymore, and giving this bull horn to Amon is also considered a release from the past. Amon was shocked and couldn't help but ask, Lion King, didn't you intervene in the battle of the gods? Yugalu grinned. Don't think that just because you can withstand 3 of my roars, you can stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods. This is not a real life and death battle, it's far from that. You must be very interested in what happened between me and Murin, and since you're finally qualified to sit here and drink with me, I'll tell you about the past. Amon smiled faintly. Lion King, if you don't want to tell me, you don't have to, I have no intention of asking. What happened between you and her is your business, I have no intention of asking. Giraffe suddenly slapped the table. Amon, let him go. It's been more than 200 years, and he came to me as soon as he left the divine realm of Ennead, obviously he wants something. If he comes out, he'll be free. This ordinary person should give the Lion King some face and beg him to come out, otherwise he won't be happy, and if he doesn't come out, who else will he come out with? The Lion King Yugalu was actually not the strongest of the 9 monsters, and before the Battle of the Gods broke out in the Anunnaki Divine Clan, he had not passed the test of endless life and death and obtained the 9th level of the power of the origin. But this giant lion was gifted and had amazing divine power, and when he roared madly, his combat power was not to be underestimated, and he was the most powerful and violent of all the divine emissaries. He joined the Ennead divine clan under the guidance of Tiamat, and a mutant lion obtained the secrets of the gods and embarked on this path step by step. He adored Murin. The violent lion had learned to be gentle. His once earth-shattering roar turned into a low and gentle song, dedicated to the god of youth and love. Why was the song melancholy? Because Murin had never been moved. Murin's smile towards him was so charming, but every time Yugalu wanted to express his admiration and desire to bathe in the river of love with this goddess, Murin always refused him and didn't even give him a chance to speak. This torture made Yugalu go crazy. The gods of the Anunnaki knew of Yugalu's love for Murin, and Murin was not actually angry, but she never hinted at it. Until one day, Murin treated Yugalu to a drink for the first time. Yugalu was overjoyed, thinking that his infatuation had finally moved the goddess of youth and love. At the banquet, the goddess smiled and personally poured wine for him, and Yugalu was so intoxicated with happiness that his heart was about to melt. He thought that after drinking this wine, he would be able to have the goddess, and then he really opened his arms and hugged Murin. Murin, however, reached out and pushed him away, and he fell limp to the ground, already drunk. When Yugalu opened his eyes, half a year had passed, and he had been drunk for so long. The Anunnaki divine clan had undergone a complete transformation, and the gods were divided and a civil war broke out, which was over before Yugalu woke up, with Tiamat and Kingu being the defeated side. Apart from Yugalu, the other 8 beast kings were driven to the battlefield by Kingu, and 5 of them were killed by the gods. Yugalu was the divine emissary who was guided by Tiamat, and his position in the Anunnaki divine clan became very awkward. Immediately after that, Enril and Marduk had a disagreement, and both of these gods hinted that if Yugalu was willing to submit, he would continue to serve as the emissary of the gods in the new divine realm. At that time, Yugalu was in great pain, and he realized that the purpose of Murin inviting him to drink was only to get him drunk so that he would not be able to participate in the battle. If Yugalu appeared on the battlefield, he would be on the opposing side of Murin. Was this a honey trap? Although he was not actually the strongest emissary under Kingu, he was taken care of with just one drink. He had a belief that if Murin really loved him, he would listen to the guidance of this goddess wholeheartedly. If Murin was only trying to keep him from going to the battlefield, then he could not accept this fact and would not stay in the Anunnaki divine clan. He found Murin, and with a loud roar that shook the heavens and earth, he asked the goddess if she truly loved him. Murin looked at him with a strange look in her eyes and said with a blank expression, "This is just a civil war between the divine clans, and no matter which side you stand on, it will not violate the oath you made when you first joined the divine clan. I only got you drunk to save your life. I know how you have felt for me all these years, and I don't want to see you die fearlessly. Whether I participate in the battle or not, it will not change the outcome of the gods. Are you going to hate me? If so, what I have done is meaningless to you." Yugalu roared with grief and indignation, "This is not the answer to the riddle I want. I just want to ask, do you really love me?" Murin asked in response, "Why should I love? What kind of love are you asking about?" Yugalu replied, "Because I love you so much, I want you to love me as much as I love you, so that we can have each other. I don't want to lose you." Murin replied indifferently, "I have never belonged, and I have been given the chance to save my life, so what loss is there to talk about? I have never loved, so why should I love me? Just because you love me, do I have to love you? The will of the gods will not accept coercion, no matter how much they claim to love me." After saying this, Murin turned and disappeared. Yugalu roared skyward on the Saya plateau, caught in a deep entanglement. He wanted to prove his love for Murin to the gods, to move the heart of the goddess. He knelt on the high glacier and called out Murin's name, the bone-chilling cold freezing his body, but Murin did not show up at all to look at him. Under the watchful eyes of the gods, Yugalu offered his most precious tool to the goddess, the claws of the giant lion. The claws that he had cultivated to this day were materials for forging sacred artifacts. They were extremely sharp and could be forged into weapons used by the gods, and he offered them to Murin, the goddess of war of the Anunnaki. Yugalu pulled out his claws one by one, and the pain was heart-wrenching. When he presented these claws in front of the statue of Murin, the goddess finally showed up. What surprised Yun was that Murin was not moved at all. Instead, she coldly asked him to leave. Her eyes were cold as she said, "Don't you think it's ridiculous to hurt yourself to gain the sympathy of a goddess and get the love you want? Not to mention a goddess who transcends eternal life, even sensible ordinary people will stay away from her. You let go of that little bit of selfishness in your heart just to get a tool that doesn't belong to you, to prove to the gods how much you love me. Put away your claws. How can someone who doesn't even cherish himself cherish that so-called love? How can someone who coerces feelings treat feelings kindly? In your heart, do you feel that you have given so much for me, and that I should repay you with love? Think about why you love me. It's not because I love you, but because people are loved only because they are cute. You are pursuing the beauty that belongs only to your own dreams, but in this way. From today onwards, I will never see you again." Yugalu shouted, "Are you going to expel me from the Anunnaki? Then why do you want to keep me alive?" Murin's figure disappeared, and her last voice came, "This is not a play. Although I have passed all kinds of tests to achieve today's results, those tests from beginning to end are not to tell me how much you love me, but to tell and move me endlessly. For a goddess, this is meaningless. Today, you are not even as good as the bull I killed. I will keep this horn as a souvenir, and since you are willing to get hurt, then go wander with your wounds." This was the past between the Lion King and Murin. At this point, Yugalu stopped talking and slowly sipped the wine in his glass, as if recalling the taste of the past. Amon asked in a low voice, "You found me for this story?" Yugalu smiled. "I just thought about it myself, Amon. What do you think? There is a curse of Murin circulating among the people, and the man who fell in love with her experienced hardship in the city. What do you think?" Amon, however, did not answer, but asked in return, when he knelt on the glacier and pulled out his claws, "Did no one advise him?" Yugalu replied, "The goddess's elven servant once advised the goddess, 'The great lion is so infatuated and so pitiful, please show him a little gentleness,' but was reprimanded by the goddess." Amon asked again, "How did the goddess reprimand the elven servant?" The Lion King looked up into the distance and replied, "I heard it too. The goddess reprimanded the servant, 'If you think he is cute, then love him, but don't come and advise me.' This kind of words can be said without any responsibility, only to easily express hypocritical kindness, and the person who really has to face him is me, not him. Aman, what did the elven servant say? The Lion King, the goddess's servant again, he has pulled out all his claws, and if you do not comfort him, I am afraid he will hurt himself even more. And the goddess reprimanded him, if the great lion chooses to hurt himself, then he should bear the consequences of his own choice, and he should not be saved by the gods because of this. At this point, Aman suddenly smiled, looking at the silent smile in the glass of wine. This smile, in the eyes of an ordinary person, seemed somewhat ruthless. The Lion King put down the glass and asked, Aman, why are you smiling? Aman said with a smile, it seems that the gods who truly transcend eternal life, transcend not only the form of existence of life, but also the pure heart, and see through the root of things. Doing that in the past would have been useless against a true god. There may be benevolent gods in this world, but there are no soft-hearted gods, and they will not change their will because of the threat of hurting themselves. Murin did not fall in love, this is not a tragedy, but merely playing up her own sadness, the goddess was not hurt. On the side, the Scorpion King suddenly chuckled, and then the Lion King also laughed. The two old friends laughed at each other, and the wine in their glasses trembled. The Scorpion King drank heartily and said, Yugalu, it seems that you are finally free. Yugalu also laughed, if I am not free, how can I heal the wounds of my body and mind, and how can I survive the test of endless life and death? Those three roars just now were an account of my realization and quest. Seeing that Aman told me about this past and gave him the bull horn, I was completely relieved. The Scorpion King put down his glass and said, what is the plan for the future? Sitting here today is also fate's arrangement, and I have a suggestion, why don't we build our own divine clan? Aman can also become a god of this divine clan, and in the future, this world will be our divine realm. In the duel just now, although these two had lost, the Scorpion King was still a little unreconciled, and actually made such an outrageous suggestion. He also wanted to encourage Aman to build a shrine for him and the Lion King in the plains of Duk, and made an agreement to build his own divine clan. Before Aman could answer, Yugalu suddenly turned his head and looked towards the sea, followed by Giraffe. Aman also looked over and was surprised to see a few people dressed in strange clothes walking towards the beach. They were 5 men and 1 woman. They seemed to have come from the sea and were heading towards the sand dunes in the east. No one had noticed the existence of these people just now, and the Lion King's roar had made them reveal their tracks, but the 3 people sitting at the table were so focused on talking that none of them noticed. Only when those people got closer did the Lion King suddenly notice that there were people, and Aman was the last to see them. When the 3 looked over, the leader of the group said softly, hearing the roar of a lion on the way has the true meaning of Samadhi, Vimalakirti, what do you mean? The speaker had a head full of short, curly hair. His ears drooped down to his shoulders. He had a graceful bearing and a serene expression. He wrapped his body with a piece of cloth that exposed his right shoulder. He walked barefoot on the hot sand. His body was draped in the sunset over the sea, and his back seemed to shine with golden light. The man named Vimalakirti was an elder, dressed in a blue and white robe, and his attire was different from that of the various countries of the Dubhi continent. A sweep of detection magic found that he was spotless and untainted. Vimalakirti replied, 3 roars, feeling and seeing, not feeling and seeing, not feeling and seeing, knowing and knowing are all impermanent. Hearing the sound of dust and being annoyed, is the seed of wisdom and the beginning of a vow. These people were not speaking the language of the Dubhi continent, and Aman had never heard it before, but he naturally had a feeling that he could understand the meaning they were expressing, seemingly right but actually not completely clear, like an extremely brilliant message magic that transmitted directly in the soul. Yugalu stood up and asked, who are you, and why are you suddenly appearing here? The leader replied, those who walk the path come from where they come, go where they go, observe the appearance of all living beings, and have just revealed themselves because of the 3 lion roars. My name is Amateus, and these are Vimalakirti, Maithreya Jo, Manjushri, Great Sarok Siddhagarbha, and Vincent Boss. Aman looked at these people curiously. Except for Vincent Boss, the clothes and appearances of the first 5 were not quite the same as those of the inhabitants of the various countries of the Dubhe continent, as if they were from the Far East, and Vincent Boss, who was walking at the back, had a shaved head. Aman could see that Vincent Boss was an ordinary person, but as for the other 5, he could not see any secrets with his eyesight, and his detection magic just now did not detect any traces of them. It turned out that they were just passing by and happened to walk here, and their figures were revealed because of Yugalu's lion roar. After answering Yugalu's question, they talked as they walked. The woman named Manjushri had a graceful figure, a beautiful face, and was quiet and stern. She looked at Yugalu and asked, "The lion roar is like thunder, getting rid of the inverted delusion, proving the endless cycle of life, and observing the appearance of all living beings. Today is like another life. But what is the difference between this life and the next, and what is the difference between my life and all living beings? Only knowing the endless cycle of life, do you know the immortality?" Aman frowned. These people had obviously heard the past events that Yugalu had just talked about, but they were talking about the realm after the endless cycle of life. Yugalu was stunned by this inexplicable question from Manjushri, and Giraffe slapped the table and said, "What? You look like gods. Which divine clan are you from?" "We are talking about establishing a divine clan. Which divine clan do you want to guide us to join?" "I'm sorry, I, the Scorpion King, do not know you, and I am not interested." Amitabha laughed. "The realm of the divine clan, my solemn pure land of Buddha, the Bodhisattva takes the Buddha's land with the sentient beings he transforms, the Buddha's land with the sentient beings he subdues, and the Buddha's land with the sentient beings who enter the Buddha's wisdom." Giraffe glared at him, held the 2 demon scorpions who were still unconscious in his arms, and continued to drink his wine. Yugalu, however, said thoughtfully, "Friends passing by, if you can walk safely under my 3 roars, please sit down and drink with me." The few of them said in unison, "Thank you, Jushri Giant Lion, for your support." They each took a piece of wine from the table, but did not take the wine, then put their hands together in front of their chests, and were about to take their leave and walk down the sand dune. As they walked by, Aman grabbed Vincentius' sleeve. "Where are you from?" "Vincentius, I am from the kingdom of Assyria, and I follow Amitabha." Aman asked again, "Why did you shave your hair?" Vincentius, "To be annoyed." Aman pointed to the others. "Their realms are much higher than ours, why do they still have hair?" Vincentius, "To be annoyed." Aman smiled and let go of his hand. Although the Scorpion King was drinking with his head down, he was very nervous. He was on guard in the dark, and dark stripes appeared on the back of his hand. These people were of unknown origin, and there was no telling where they were from, so it was normal for Giraffe to be wary. As Amitabha walked over, his eyes slid past Giraffe, but fell on Aman's face, and he suddenly stopped and said, "The past of the past is gone, the future of the future is yet to come, and the present of the present does not exist in the present. If you want to prove the endless sea of suffering, you must be at the ultimate level, transcend life, and be lifeless. Would you like to hear it?" The Maitreya Ark looked slightly puzzled, as if surprised by Amitabha's sudden question to Aman. Aman shook his head and said, "I understand what you are talking about. Is it referring to the path of the gods that transcend eternal life? But I want to prove it myself. I don't want to accept the guidance of the so-called divine clan." Amitabha did not say anything more, turned and left, and Vimalakirti hesitated to speak, following Amitabha. Amitabha walked down the sand dune and said to great Saroksidagarbha, "You have seen the underworld of Osiris, and you want to go to the underworld of Kela. Have you gained anything?" Great Saroksidagarbha replied, "I have gained something, but it is not what I want to prove. This is a good deed, and the good deeds are shared by all living beings." Chapter 188. Manjushri looked back and smiled, her charm indescribable, and said, "If the information illusion cast by magic is like this, the things of the world are like birds in the sky, like people are annoyed, like one has woken up from a dream. Now that one has escaped from the sea of bitterness, one should seek to establish one's own everything. If one wishes to seek the Tao, why not come with me?" Yugalu put down his wine glass and strode down the sand dune. Those people walked leisurely, but Yugalu could not catch up. Then with a roar, he turned into a lion and sprinted forward, soon disappearing into the horizon. The Scorpion King put down the ice and fire scorpions, turned around and shouted, "Lion King, you have escaped from the Ennead. Where are you going with these people? We haven't finished talking yet." The sound of sprinkling water echoed in the desert, but Yugalu had already disappeared. Sprinkling water scolded in the direction where he had disappeared. "This lion's temper hasn't changed, still so easily moved and stubborn. He had just escaped from the Ennead, but who knows where he was abducted by some god." Then he turned around and sat down. The fierce Scorpion King looked a little bleak as he looked at the wine on the table and muttered to himself, "Where did these gods come from? What are they preaching? It seems that there are still unknown divine clans in this world. Without the guidance of a divine clan, it is too difficult to explore alone, but I refuse to turn back." Yugalu left, and the Scorpion King drank a few mouthfuls of wine before looking up at Amon and saying, "Murin has taken a liking to him, and the gods are saying that she did not hesitate to abandon her ex-husband, Demuzid, and even sent Demuzid to the underworld in exchange, and will definitely be introduced into the Anunnaki divine clan. It is a great fortune for her to be a practitioner of the mortal world. But how difficult is it to truly transcend eternal life, and I hope there will be such a day. If you are not interested in what those gods said just now, I am afraid you are even less interested in my scorpion suggestion. The righteous sect has already stepped into the Anunnaki divine clan, and there is indeed no need to waver in their beliefs." Amon smiled bitterly. "Don't you know my relationship with Enlil? It was he who instigated the flood to destroy my home. No matter what sins my people have committed, I have already bid farewell to him." Sprinkle Water said, "So you want to join Marduk's side? I heard that Murin won the bet with Enlil and can freely enter and exit Anunnaki's divine realm, so it's not impossible to bring her into Marduk's side." Amon shook his head. "The path I'm trying to prove may not be the same. There are predecessors' insights and my own quest. I've been thinking, how did the gods transcend eternal life? What is the so-called divinity? I'm just a witness, I don't want to join any god system." These words were from the bottom of his heart. Amon was an anomaly. He had never received guidance from any god system, and he had solved the unsolved puzzles of Crazy, Ol and Bear in his difficult exploration. Finally, he had comprehended and mastered the power of the origin, and he had already achieved the 8th level. He had also experienced everything in Schrodinger's spiritual imprint, and even learned about the torture of fate and the interrogation of the apocalypse. Before he became a true god, he no longer needed the guidance of any god system, and he only needed to seek confirmation himself. These were things that the Scorpion King did not know. Sprinkle Water smiled. "Maybe I'm thinking too much. No matter who, whether they believe in it or not, the gods are there. I was once an emissary of the gods, and I have received guidance from the oracle. I know what is wrong with the power of the origin and what I practice, so I only think about how to become a true god who transcends eternal life. Don't think that I can fight them with my great power on earth, but as a living being, the meaning of existence is actually different. I also want to tell you one last thing, the Tiamat's wrath cannot kill a true god who transcends eternal life." Amon was actually surprised and replied, "Thank you for the reminder, I have read about the Tiamat's wrath, only that it can severely injure the gods, but not necessarily destroy them. Is this the last thing you want to tell me?" Sprinkle Water sighed and said, "I once made a vow, although Tiamat, who guided me has fallen, and I can no longer be driven by the Anunnaki divine clan, the secret of the gods still cannot be revealed. Only when I become a true god who transcends eternal life and have my own divine realm and divine clan will I be able to tell you what that path is. This is the agreement between the gods, and only then will I be qualified to join this agreement, which is why I said those words to you. But there is already a ready-made shortcut, and there is no need to pin my hopes on this unseen hope. Now do you understand why the Lion King Zhoukai left, and why I ignored those gods? We all have our own desired paths." Amon raised his glass and said, "The agreement of the gods has nothing to do with me, but in any case, I want to thank you for telling me this today. I can see that you also want to find someone to talk to clarify and strengthen your beliefs in your talk. After drinking for half a day, the Scorpion King stretched out his arm for the first time and clinked his glass with Amon's. Wiser than I thought, you have really seen through a lot of things. In order to thank you for listening to me today, I will give you another promise. It is also a kind of hope. Sprinkle Water's words had unknowingly taken on the tone of a god, and in the legends of the Dubhi continent, divine emissaries like him who had passed the test of endless life and death could already be called gods, just like Batet in the past. And when they referred to the true gods, they used the Be title, which was the true god who transcends eternal life, and deliberately different. Amon asked, "What kind of hope?" Sprinkle Water said meaningfully, "It is a rare talent. But don't forget about the famous curse of the goddess. If one day I am injured like Yugalu and leave the Anunnaki divine clan, and I have become a true god who transcends eternal life and established my own divine clan, I would welcome you to become a god of this divine clan. Welcome to the pantheon of gods." I wanted to discuss this with the Lion King, but he ran away. Amon replied, "Thank you for saying so, but I am not Yugalu. Perhaps you have misunderstood my relationship with Murin. I am just fulfilling my promise to the goddess. It has nothing to do with whether she loves me or not." The Scorpion King shook his head and said, "If bad luck really comes one day, then it will not be good. Good luck." Amon hung his head and smiled bitterly. Even if Murin really has such a curse, and I have already experienced enough suffering. Sprinkle Water stood up and patted Amon on the shoulder and said, "You are not simple, just don't forget what I said today. That friend has been here for a long time, and it seems that he has something to do. Solve your own problems first." The power of the Lion King's 3 roars was really amazing, and although Sprinkle Water had protected the ice and fire scorpions from harm, these 2 demon scorpions were still unconscious. Sprinkle Water picked up his 2 beloved concubines and left, the quicksand under his feet surging up and strangely disappearing. Amon looked back at the distant sky and said, "Madanzo, how long have you been here? Come down and rest for a while." A white cloud floated down, and the crystal shuttle was put away. Madanzo staggered towards the sand dune and sat on the chair that Sprinkle Water had just sat on, gasping for breath. Amon looked at him and said with a smile, "The wine is in front of you, how can you be drunk before you even drink it?" Madanzo said with a bitter face, "Ammonius. Fortunately, I came late and was far away. That Lion King's roar was too powerful, and I almost fell down. I barely managed to stabilize my body in the air." Amon pointed at the banquet in front of him and said, "They have all left, don't waste the wine and delicacies. Eat and drink to your heart's content first, I think you look very tired." Metatro picked up the wine and tasted it. He exclaimed in admiration, "Good wine, a peerless wine. That Lion King really knows how to enjoy." The 2 enjoyed the almost untouched banquet, and after eating and drinking to their heart's content, Amon then asked, "When did you arrive, what did you see, and what did you hear?" Madanzo replied, "I flew over from afar when I heard the Lion King's roar. Later, that group of strange fellows passed by, and I heard their conversation." "Who are they?" "Their words are strange, and they don't put on any airs, but it feels like they are even more arrogant than the gods." Amon said nonchalantly, "Ask them who they are, stick to your beliefs, and seek your own path. Instead of following Moses and the others to the plains of Duk, you came to find me on this road. Did something happen again?" Madanzo sighed, "Ammonius, your people are simply a whirlpool, a magnet, no matter where they go, it would be surprising if they don't get into trouble." After Moses and the others left the border of Igut, they crossed the Saya Desert and entered the plains of Duk along the east bank of the inland lake, which should be the safest route. Because the west bank of the inland lake was the trade route between Igut and Hittite, there were now towns, farms, and garrison checkpoints, and the place where Amon was about to fight Celia was also in this area. Further ahead into the plains of Duk, there was also a large swamp, which was difficult to pass through. Moses and the others crossed from the east bank of the inland lake, which was close to the Euphrates River valley. Although the road was very rugged, after crossing the mountains, they could directly reach the plains. The plains of Duk had attracted explorers from surrounding countries, but it was difficult to see a place where people gathered in such a large wilderness, at least a year ago. But when Moses led his people over the mountains on the shore of the lake, they appeared in the valley leading to the plains. However, in front of him was a newly constructed city, or perhaps it was a city that was only half constructed. This was a resting place and trading market for explorers and warriors who killed monsters, and Moses and the others could have rested here and bought supplies before untying the ropes, but they were unexpectedly stopped by the army sent by this city-state. Moses and the others only had 60 people, while the other side had 800 warriors with various weapons, including highland giants who were good at fighting and organized into military formations. Moses was surprised and stepped forward to ask, "We are just explorers who want to go deep into the wilderness, and we are not enemies of you. Like other explorers, we will exchange supplies and pay taxes in the town. Why did you summon so many warriors to stop us?" The city-state under construction was actually called Marduk City, and the lord of the city was a short highland giant named Usser. He sent someone to Moses, "We are the miners of the town of Duk who escaped from Igut, and if we want to enter the plains of Duk, we have two choices. Either they would remain in my city, profess Marduk, and swear in the shrine, or if they wish to return home by way of this place, they must promise the gods to build a shrine to Marduk in the place where they stand, and to perform the rite of summoning him to their presence. As a guarantee, we must keep our leader here until the promise is fulfilled." Medanzo knew Usser, who was the leader of the allied highland giants who kidnapped Princess Scarlet. In fact, he was sent by Princess Scarlet to the plains of Duk to establish a city-state, and at that time he extorted a large batch of supplies from the town of Arcade. Now the location of this city-state was stuck on the throat of the eastern shore of the inland lake into the plains of Duk. Moses and the others did not force their way in, so Medanzo sneaked into Marduk city as a wandering hunter and found the lord of Usser to catch up. He woke Usser up in the middle of the night in his bedroom and forced the lord to let him go with a broken blade to his neck. Usser said in a sobbing tone, "Fearless warrior, that was not only the order of Princess Scarlet, but also the oracle of Marduk. Even if you kill me, it will be useless, and if you kill me, you won't be able to escape." Medanzo was surprised. "Marduk's oracle, what's going on?" Usser explained, "I don't know what's going on either. I built this city-state and became the lord and chief priest here, gaining the support of Princess Scarlet and the kingdom of Babylon. After the shrine was defeated, I led several priests to perform the ceremony, and that night Marduk spoke in my soul. The god told me that the miners of the town of Duk were going to pass through here, and that they had to promise not to build statues for any gods except Marduk, otherwise they would not be allowed to pass. The situation was beyond Medanzo's control, and he immediately rushed back to discuss it with Link. They made two sets of plans: either let John lead the army of Duk to fight and open a path for Moses and the others, or let Moses and the others turn back and go around the west bank of the inland lake, avoiding the scale of Marduk's control. The former plan was too expensive, and the city-state built under the leadership of Aesop was just beginning to take shape. Although the warriors led by John were not afraid of fighting Marduk, they would also have to suffer losses on both sides. The latter plan was difficult, and Moses and the others would have to pass through the land controlled by Saya, and after crossing the inland lake, they would have to pass through the impassable charcoal marsh. The two decided to make two preparations, with Medanzo going to explore the way first, while Link rushed to the town of Duk and told John to prepare for the rescue. When Link returned to Duk, he learned that there had also been an accident there. At the foot of the Saya Plateau to the north of Duk, a large group of highlanders suddenly appeared. They did not look like the inhabitants of the mountain tribes. Obviously, they had received organized training. Carrying all kinds of equipment and supplies with them, they quickly set up camps and fortifications, forming the prototype of a city-state at an astonishing speed. This was obviously not a spontaneous action. They were strong and well-trained, their resources were in order, and the deployment of their personnel was extremely orderly, as though they were soldiers and logistics personnel that had been trained for a long time. The settlement they built was less than 100 miles away from the city-state built by Link. They occupied the fertile land, opened up wastelands, and also occupied the mines where the Dushians had originally mined parangons and iron ore. They organized people to mine the parangon cores and iron ore, smelting fine iron on the spot, obviously preparing for large-scale immigration and advancing to the entire plains of Duk. The city-state built by Link occupied the largest piece of fertile land on the plains of Duk, and there was a conflict after the outsiders occupied the mines. Fortunately, Link and the others had already built strong walls, and under the governance of Aesop, they already had a large population and a firm foothold. Otherwise, they would not have been able to compete with the other party. Link and Madanzo were not there, and Aesop avoided conflict at first. Later, John came with 36 personal guards, using the battle formation of the warriors trained by Madanzo, and asked the other party to abandon the occupied mines. There were 2 battles, and neither side gained the upper hand. So they began to negotiate. The other party believed that the mines were originally ownerless, and John took out the title deed of Duk to prove that it was not ownerless, that people had been mining since ancient times, and that roads had been built and veins had been dug. The other party said that the Dukian miners had long disappeared due to the rewards and punishments of the gods, and they were unwilling to give up the most precious mines on the continent. In fact, both sides understood that it was the most important strategic base for establishing a foothold on the plains of Duk and annexing thousands of miles of fertile land. Warrior John fought them again and found that it was not a problem to rely on his own city-state to defend it, but it was not quite possible to repel those people, so he sat down for a second negotiation. John did not have reinforcements, and the other party's troops were gradually increasing. They came across the Saya Plateau, and the walls built around the fake settlement were getting stronger and stronger. The first permanent building built was the Shrine of Enrol. It was obviously unlucky for John to continue to attack under such circumstances, and Aesop made another suggestion in a timely manner. In the past, Aesop lacked a strong labor force to mine ores and/or cores. Today, the residents were no longer the Duk miners of the past, but mainly the barbarians. They had absorbed the scattered tribes in the area, as well as the wandering explorers from the surrounding countries. They had to plant land to feed themselves and build a city-state, and simply could not spare enough strong labor to mine such a large mine. So Aesop suggested that the 2 sides cooperate. As long as the mine was recognized as belonging to the Dushians, the other party could organize strong and powerful Highlanders to do the heavy mining work, and in return, they could keep the ore and/or cores they mined, or they could let Aesop buy them at a fair price on the continent. This was a good idea that had the best of both worlds. The Dushians were accumulating power, and they did not want to have a full-scale conflict with the barbarians and other tribes who already had a foothold, so they agreed to this condition of cooperation, and the plains of Duk restored temporary peace. Chapter 189. 176. The road under your feet. Amon was taken aback and replied somewhat awkwardly, "Did they really build the shrine like that? I did appear there with Murin in my arms, and they actually carved a statue just like that. I don't care, this is the consequence of what I did, it's just that the consequences are a bit funny." Amon was a little stunned at first when he heard that the god on the altar of the shrine that Link had built in the city of Salem was actually the image of him holding Murin in his arms, but after thinking about it, he just smiled, not minding it or feeling proud of it. His view on this issue was not quite the same as that of ordinary people, and it naturally didn't matter if Link did not erect a statue for him, and he wouldn't blame him if he did. After all, wouldn't he dare to take responsibility for what he did? Besides, he had already passed the test of endless life and death and had the 9th level of the power of origin, so there was nothing wrong with erecting a statue in the shrine, and the fact that Murin did not show up to cause trouble showed that she was not dissatisfied, as long as she was willing. When Goliath had had enough of laughing, he said seriously, "As early as a few years ago, I tried to use the legendary Great Prophecy once, and realized that the plains of Duk would become 1,000 miles of fertile land, but it would also cause disputes between the gods and the surrounding countries. You and I both know the origin of the flood, and Enrol has turned the plains of Duk back into fertile land, allowing hundreds of thousands of people to live in peace, and is indeed praised by all." Amon snorted coldly and said, "I naturally know that if you had not led the people to resist the flood back then, Saya would also have been destroyed." Goliath's expression had a touch of sadness. "I was one who was used by Enrol, and I used to admire him so much. We had played 2 games of chess, and I myself was also a chess piece on the god's chessboard. Even I had used the Great Prophecy to come to this conclusion, so how could the god who started the flood not know? Enlil is bound to let his people occupy that fertile land and fill the plains of Duk with his shrines. Ammon asked in a noncommittal tone, do you think he will succeed? Goliath looked up at the sky. In Enlil's vision, he only had to consider whether Marduk would agree or not. Although I was unwilling to serve him anymore, I still commanded the army to repel the army of Babylon, which was what I had to do. The Assyrian kingdom sending the giant legion to suddenly cross the plateau and appear in the plains of Duk should have been a well-prepared plan, and no one had expected it in advance. The Assyrian kingdom wanted to expand their territory, and their god was Enlil. Only now did I understand that Enlil's most important chess piece was the Assyrian kingdom. His calculations are really good. No matter how many wise men there are on the continent, they are no match for him. This is what a god should be. Ammon sighed somewhat helplessly. Of course Marduk would do it. There was a mage named Usur who united the highland giant tribe and built the city of Marduk on the throat in the southeast corner of the plains of Duk. Enlil probably thought of this long ago, and the Assyrian kingdom in the north also built the city of Enlil. Judging from the local battlefield, Marduk would not be a match for Enlil, and the Assyrian kingdom would occupy the entire plains of Duk from north to south, eventually defeating Marduk. Goliath smiled bitterly. Judging from the situation at the time, this should have been a reasonable prophecy, but it was not the reality, and the high and mighty god Enlil did not control everything. The biggest variable now is the emergence of Salem. You do not have the support of a kingdom like the others, but you have established a city in the middle of the plains of Duk, which is beyond the expectations of the gods. Ammon sneered. Enlil would definitely not want to see Salem appear there. Goliath turned his head and said, that may not be the case. The heart of a god is unpredictable, it depends on whether you are willing to build his shrine or not. Ammon asked in return, Honorable Supreme Mage, you were once the chief priest of the Enlil Shrine, and now you are the chief honorary elder of the Hittite Academy of Magic, but you don't seem to have a good impression of the king of the kingdom, Enlil. Goliath replied, it's more than a bad impression. I know that there are many priests who do not give their hearts to the gods, they only satisfy their vanity and lust in the name of the gods on earth. But I am different. I once sincerely believed in the gods and devoutly waited for the gods to summon me. I am not as lucky as you to have hugged the goddess in public at a young age. I have been a priest for so many years, but I have only really interacted with the gods once, and that was when the flood besieged Saya, when I heard Enlil's voice in the shrine. It was a voice I had been looking forward to for many years, and it's funny to say that when I really saw him, I began to distance myself from him. Ammon said, even you have distanced yourself from him, how can I let his shrine gain a foothold in Salem? I would rather have my statue hug the goddess Murin and stand on the altar for Enlil to take a good look at. Goliath grinned. Is that statue a silent mockery? You are still a little childish after all, and doing so is like being angry. Have you ever thought that maybe it's not worth it? The cost of stopping Enlil's wishes may be great. Ammon narrowed his eyes in the moonlight and said, one must always persevere, and some things must be done even though they are known to be difficult, otherwise what is the point of living in this world? Goliath looked at him. You have the shadow of Nietzsche in you, but you are not him. Ammon suddenly asked again, the kingdom of Assyria and the Hittite kingdom believe in the same god, Enlil. What is the relationship between the two countries? Goliath replied, the relationship between the two countries is very tense, and the potential conflicts are very intense, many of which are precisely because they believe in the same god. Both kings claim that they are the real incarnation of Enlil on earth, and if it weren't for the fact that the strategic focus of the Hittite kingdom over the past few decades has been to get rid of the control of the empire of Igut, I'm afraid a war would have broken out with Assyria long ago. Ammon frowned. Both kingdoms believe in Enlil, but claim that they are the true faith. If they start fighting and killing each other, what will the gods think? Goliath looked at the dark swamp jungle. Is the Enlil in their eyes the real Enlil? At least in my eyes, there is another Enlil. I once wrote secret letters to both Gilgamesh and Rod Dik, hoping to establish a peaceful city-state before foreseeing the changes that would take place in the plains of Duk, but it didn't work, and it was actually impossible to succeed. Now you have done more than I have, and have established the city of Salem, but it has become the center of the conflict. Ammon, even without the city of Salem that I built, would the plains of Duk not have bloodshed and strife? Goliath shook his head. It would have, and even if there were no gods, the kingdoms on earth would not have given up the struggle. Ammon, you have even embraced a goddess, and your own achievements are already equivalent to many of the legendary gods, so in the eyes of the gods, how do you think they would view the strife in the plains of Duk? Ammon was silent for a long time, as if thinking hard, and only after a long time did he reply, how people coexist is decided by people themselves, and it may not be the will of one person, but it is the sum of the will of all people. If all people are seen as one person, then the strife in the world is the inner conflict of this person, the struggle and entanglement of countless selves, just as people often have all kinds of contradictions in their hearts, and will feel all kinds of depression. This may be a realm that only the gods have, and I can only describe it and not prove it, because after all, I am not a god yet. Goliath nodded and said, we are just talking about it. If it is really possible to transcend all this in training, perhaps many gods cannot do it. Ammon, I am willing to help the city of Salem against the invasion of the kingdom of Assyria, but I also need your help. Ammon, if you have something to say, just say it, there is no need to mention help. Goliath, I will send my student Raphael to follow you and help you open the way in the swamp, it will also be a kind of experience for him. Ammon, as long as he does not find it difficult and dangerous, then he can follow me to open the way. From beginning to end, Goliath did not open his mouth to ask Ammon what was the source of power that the gods had mastered. This made Ammon deeply admire Goliath. It seemed that there were almost no unexpected disturbances in this world that could shake Goliath's heart. Goliath had his own beliefs and path, and the so-called love was not just about status and wealth in the world. A large number of people recruited by Saya arrived at the eastern shore of the inland lake, at the southern end of the charcoal marsh. Ammon had already left, but a path had appeared in the swamp, winding around areas that were difficult to pass through, cutting away thorns to fill in the low-lying areas, and extending into the depths of the swamp, just wide enough for two people to walk side by side. There was no need for maps, no need for people to explore the way. People laid the roadbed with gravel and dry soil, uprooted the bushes and thorns on both sides, and filled in the swamp. Using the trees cut on the spot as fire, the soil on the road was baked into a half-dry state, and continued to push forward, building a solid road that could allow two carriages to walk side by side. Not to mention how the people were rushing to build the road, Ammon was moving forward in the depths of the charcoal marsh, standing on the shoulder of the king Ironback, El March. El Mar's huge body was more than 10 feet long, and compared to the average Ironback, its body was relatively thin, and the place its belly swam through was just the width of two people. No matter what the terrain ahead, the big Ironback crawled past, leaving a path behind it. Looking ahead, Ammon was holding a very special staff or weapon, which was Humbaba's tusk. He stood on the back of the king Ironback and gently waved the tusk, like a warrior's scimitar or longsword. A faint golden light swept past, and the strange rocks in the way were turned to dust. When it encountered a low-lying area, a strange power surged, and the soil in the distance rolled up to fill in a passage. Elmar waved its front claws from time to time as it moved forward, the sharp shadows of its claws turning into cold glints, uprooting the bushes and throwing them to the sides, and its long tail constantly fell from the air, slapping the road behind it. Raphael walked behind with his staff in hand, and the impassable charcoal marsh was now a passable path under his feet. Raphael volunteered to follow Ammon to clear the way. He also wanted to see how this legendary figure of the continent would create another miracle, but at first he didn't find anything strange. The sword light emitted by Ammon's tusk was the martial technique of a 9th-level supreme warrior, and the mud that surged up to fill in the swamps and depressions encountered along the way was the simplest low-level earth elemental magic, which almost every supreme warrior who had undergone the second awakening of power could do. Ammon's power was nothing more than extraordinary, and for him, these were just ordinary means. But as a day passed, Raphael began to feel surprised, and as the second day passed, this surprise turned into shock, and by the third day, this shock finally turned into deep admiration. What Ah Ming did seemed simple at the beginning, but in the end, it became the most complicated thing. Uprooting bushes, smashing Luan stones, filling in the swamps, these were not magical, ordinary people could do it, the only difference was the speed of the means. But the Supreme General, the 9th-level Supreme Warrior, and the top powerhouse of the continent were doing such trivial things. Once he started, he didn't stop. For several days and nights, not to mention rest, even the speed of his advance did not change. Some areas were very complicated and difficult to clear, while some areas were relatively easier, but Amon commanded Elmar to move forward at the same speed, neither too fast nor too slow. This was not fighting on the battlefield, where there was neither the enemy's pressure nor the soldiers' shouts of encouragement. It was so lonely and boring in the endless jungle swamps. Endless repetition of the simplest of tasks, but using a power that could shake the entire continent, was almost unbearably dull. Raphael had never seen anyone in such a boring situation who could do such a boring job so calmly without getting tired of it, as if they would never stop. Another 3 days passed, and Amon didn't even say a word. Raphael couldn't describe his feelings. He vaguely saw the shadow of his teacher, Goliath, in Amon. When the flood besieged Saya, Goliath also walked around the city silently for many days, holding a staff in his hand to preside over the defensive formation, and constantly operating magic to strengthen the city walls to block the flood. When the flood receded, he could barely stand. But Ah Meng's situation was different from Golier's back then. There was no sense of crisis, nor was there anyone's eagerness. There wasn't even a need. He was doing it on his own in the uninhabited swamp. The road stretched on, winding for an unknown length. The gloomy charcoal forest seemed to be an abyss with no hope. Amon continuously used martial arts and magic, and his endurance and concentration were beyond the reach of ordinary supreme warriors. Raphael didn't stay idle behind. Since he volunteered to help, Goliath also sent him. Before setting off, Amon gave Raphael a task, to deal with any accidents that might appear at any time in the swamps. Amon concentrated on opening the road and didn't want to be disturbed. Now that there were many monsters in the charcoal swamp, if they launched a surprise attack, Raphael would deal with it. Ordinary beasts would have been frightened away when they heard the noise, but some of the more aggressive monsters would occasionally attack, but Raphael would easily deal with them. The most troublesome monsters along the way were the giant water demons that lived here. Some of them were thicker than the mouth of a bowl, and would become fierce after being disturbed. This kind of giant water demon could swallow an adult, and its powerful body could entangle a strong bull to death. It was very difficult to find them lurking in the swamp, and it could catch people off guard when it suddenly sprang up. Raphael had to use detection magic at all times. In 6 days, he encountered more than a dozen fierce giant water demons. Although they couldn't be a match for a supreme mage, following them for 6 days and 6 nights in a row made Raphael tired. Seeing that Amon had no intention of stopping, the young supreme mage finally spoke. "Supreme General, I suggest you take a break. You can only last long with tension and relaxation. It's more efficient than exhausting all your strength at once." Amon smiled and said, "You're right, that's why I haven't been doing my best. Although the current speed is much slower than opening the road at full strength, in terms of continuous effect, it's the highest efficiency." Raphael exclaimed, "Supreme General, you've exceeded my expectations. You're not only powerful in terms of strength. Although you haven't done your best, I'm worried that Elmar can't take it." "Amon, Elmar is a mutant Ironback king, it's innately powerful and incomparable to humans." Raphael still advised, "That depends on who it's compared to, it can't be compared to you, Supreme General. At this speed, it's impossible for it to persevere until the road is completely opened." Amon said without turning his head, "Your judgment is correct, I didn't intend to let Elmar help me open all the roads. My plan was to walk at the same speed to the other side in 1 month. Elmar would collapse from exhaustion when I was halfway there. I just wanted to be exhausted, to have a good experience, and to take this opportunity to let it experience a kind of test. Raphael, if Elmar is exhausted and unable to move forward, it will be very dangerous to stay in the charcoal marsh." Amon smiled again, "That's why I promised Goliath to bring you here. With the protection of a supreme mage like you, Elmar should have no problem recuperating and recovering in the swamp. You stay in the swamp to protect it, I'll continue to open the road alone. Raphael was stunned. So your plan is to open the back of the road by yourself, and only let me and Elmar help the front half? Aman said meaningfully, No, this road is one in my eyes, there's no such thing as half or the other. You're helping me open the whole road. Supreme Mage, leaving you in the middle of the charcoal marsh just to protect an iron back, isn't that an insult to your noble status? Raphael hurriedly explained, No, if this is the help you need, I'd be happy to. Aman looked down at Elmar, who was still struggling to open the way, and for some reason, suddenly changed his mind. He turned back and said, Then let's rest for a day, you're tired. We'll open the road at this speed, walk for 6 days and rest for 1 day, and we should be able to reach the other end in a month. Raphael said, I can still hold on. Aman smiled, You're really tired, Elmar has already reminded me, we'll rest for a day. Chapter 190. 174. Succubus Mermaid. The fighting style of warriors was very different from that of mages. Under normal circumstances, as long as one was prepared, a warrior of the same level was no match for a mage, because the power used in magic was mysterious to ordinary people. But after reaching a high level, this difference would become smaller and smaller. It was said that there was no difference in power between a 9th-level warrior and a 9th-level mage. If a warrior's magic protection was broken through, even a 9th-level supreme mage's life would be in danger. This was what people usually thought, but people like Enkidu were an exception. Enkidu was not only a 9th-level warrior, but also a supreme warrior who had reached the peak of the realm. If there were other supreme warriors who had broken through the 9th level on the continent, they could not be compared with Enkidu. Just like there was a difference in strength between the 9th-level supreme mages. Of course, Celia was prepared for the duel with Aman. She would not let him fight in close combat, and she had declared that she would bring her summoned beasts with her. She might have already thought about how to deal with a supreme warrior. Even if Aman had just reached the 9th level, Celia might still have a chance to win, but it would be more difficult than she had expected. Everyone was thinking this way, only Goliath smiled meaningfully without saying a word. He knew Aman's background. Since Aman had reached the 9th level, he was also a 9th-level supreme mage. In fact, even Goliath did not know Aman's latest situation. Aman was no longer a simple 9th-level mage and warrior. Now that he had mastered the power of the origin, there was only a focus on cultivation and talent, and there was no difference in the means he used. The crowd did not drink much. After drinking 3 cups, Celia took the initiative to stand up and said, "Since there is still something to talk about, let's hurry up and fight." Aman put down his cup and walked out of the big tent. He stood in the open space beside the swamp and said, "You are really straightforward, so let's start now. I am a warrior, so I will first step back 50 steps and ask the Supreme Mage to take his time to cast the spell." Celia untied her cloak and walked to the open space in her tight-fitting attire. She stood 50 paces away from Aman. Her servant, Rulio, bowed and handed over a spotlessly white staff. Aman narrowed his eyes. He could tell that it was a rare bone staff. It was pure in nature and suitable for casting various divine arts. Although it was not embedded with parangons, it was much more useful than the precious staff he gave to Medanzo and Link, which were embedded with 7 parangons. It was unknown how many years of history this object had, but after being processed by divine arts, it was still as bright as new. Its entire body was pure white, glistening with an ivory luster, and the end was sharpened like a long thorn. It was different from ordinary staffs. It was very tough and could be used as a weapon. In close combat, it was equivalent to a sharp short shuttle. This kind of staff was strange and rare. With Amon's current ability, he no longer needed a staff to cast divine arts. When he encountered a powerful enemy, he needed a weapon that could operate magic at the same time. This kind of staff provided a good idea. His disciples needed this kind of artifact, and most of the emissaries of the gods used similar weapons. The object in Celia's hand had a very special origin. It was of the same origin as something on Amon's body. It was made from the bone of the bull killed by Murin in the War of the Gods. The gods gave it to the shrines on earth, and it was kept by the Hittite kingdom for generations. As a royal noble, Celia obtained this precious staff after becoming a supreme mage. She usually did not carry it with her. Taking it out today showed how much importance she attached to this battle. Seeing Celia pick up the staff, Amon asked with a smile, "Where is your summoned beast?" Celia replied, "It will appear when it is needed." "Where is the Supreme General's cat?" Amon sighed, "Are you talking about Schrödinger?" "She has left me to seek the freedom of liberation. I brought another beast king with me today. It will appear when it is needed." Celia nodded and said, "In that case, the little girl will make the first move." After that, she waved her staff at Amon. Amon had seen many supreme mages in action, but they were all on the battlefield with their staffs raised high, casting large-scale magic to assist in the battle. Apart from Gilgamesh, this was the first time he had seen such a direct attack. The beautiful and lovely girl waved her staff. Her delicate baby face was still wearing a smile, but her attack was not polite at all. The bone staff transformed into a series of afterimages. The surrounding swamps and thickets reverberated with the sound of galloping horses. The innumerable staff shadows carried with them a roaring impact, as though a herd of bison were pouncing towards Amon viciously. This was not the conventional fighting style of a supreme mage. Celia used this special staff to attack as a form of defense, making it impossible for a warrior to get close. If it were someone else, they might have panicked in the face of this scene. Amon shouted, broke through the momentum of the galloping horses, took a step forward, and punched. He was unarmed and did not wear gloves, but his fist was wrapped in a faint golden light. This was the most brilliant martial art in the world. It was a pure explosion of strength and energy. As long as it was strong enough, it could resist all magic. The punch was like a boulder hitting a storeroom full of jars and jars. Accompanied by a series of shattering sounds, the shadow of the staff was annihilated. Amon took the blow head-on. The shadow of the staff disappeared, but Celia did not panic. She shook the staff in her hand, and a cylindrical white light shot out, like a white rainbow or lightning. It was the sharpest attack among the shadow of the staff, and at this moment, it had already reached Amon. Amon did not retreat, but instead moved forward. He punched the white light with his left hand. The white pillar of light exploded with smoke. It was the scattered energy that had been condensed and turned into rays of light. Although she was 50 steps away, Celia was shaken back 2 steps with a muffled groan. She raised her staff and struck down while retreating. Light and shadow condensed above Amon's head, and suddenly a huge shadow of a bone staff appeared and smashed down. Amon snorted. Good move. He leapt up and punched out. Before the shadow of the gigantic bone staff could solidify, it was smashed into pieces, and the shadow gradually dissipated. With a loud thud, Amon landed firmly on the ground. At the moment when Amon landed, Celia waved her staff horizontally, and there was another sharp whistle. The wind and clouds changed, as if the sky and earth were upside down. The scenery around Amon changed completely. The solid ground under his feet instantly turned into a swamp, squirming and spinning as if he was about to sink. This was the most brilliant earth elemental sand surge. It also had information illusions, turning the soil into a semi-liquefied state. For a warrior, this was the most deadly attack, making it impossible for him to exert any strength. Amon, however, did not fall into it. Supreme warriors could also practice auxiliary magic. He took a step forward, and the quicksand-like ground caved in, as if a membrane had been stretched out, just in time to support his steps. This was spatial magic, which could gather energy with very weak support. It could not be used directly for attack, but it could be used to assist in battle. It was not very profound, but it was used quite skillfully. Celia reacted quickly. Seeing that Amon did not sink into the quicksand-like swamp, she raised her staff. Golden divine runes appeared on the surface of the crystal bone staff, and the light burst out to cover her figure. Rulio, who was standing beside her and watching the battle, also disappeared in the light. Then, Ming's eyes widened, and all he saw was a black ocean. The swamp and the black soil had turned into a surging state, and the real surging was mixed with illusory images. The sound of waves beating on the shore came from all directions, and there was no end to it as far as the eye could see. On the distant horizon stood a person. He had a human head and a fish body, and his tail swam in the liquid. He straightened his upper body and played a piccolo. What came from the piccolo was not the sound of a flute, but an ancient ballad. In the turbulent and dangerous boundless black ocean, the song seemed so beautiful. It had an indescribable power that made people want to close their eyes and immerse themselves in it, forgetting all suffering and sorrow. This was an attack that attacked the soul, and it could make people's consciousness fall into a trance and fall into a deep sleep. At the same time, it was a half-real, half-illusory magic that made people fall into a world of illusion. Celia's summoned beast finally made a move, in such an unexpected way. He was Rulio. This was the scene that Amon was facing. The onlookers only saw the staff in Celia's hand emitting a dazzling light, which engulfed her and Rulio's figure. Amon stopped, his eyes fixed on the place where Celia was, looking into the distance, and his feet slowly sank into the soil. As soon as Rulio made his move, he was able to temporarily pin down this powerful 9th-level warrior. If it was on the battlefield, there would be priests who could awaken Amon at any time, and the army would rush over to provide support. But in a personal battle, this was simply the best way to deal with a warrior. Celia naturally would not miss such an excellent opportunity to win. Several translucent flying ropes appeared from the light. These were air elemental magic that gathered out of thin air. They curled towards Amon's body, and were about to tie him up tightly. A dull roar came from under the flowing soil, and a giant golden tail with dark brown spots suddenly broke out of the soil. This tail was very long. It came out from Amon's back and curled down in mid-air, scattering the flying ropes. Then, the soil began to surge, and a huge mutated ironback beast came out. Amon's figure was also rising, and he was standing on the back of this ironback beast. The onlookers were shocked. It turned out that Amon's summoned beast was actually a mutated ironback king, and it had long been lurking under Amon's feet. Except for Goliath, no one else had discovered it beforehand. Celia, who was in the midst of battle, was even more shocked. Ironbacks were animals that lived in swamps, and such a huge mutated ironback king had appeared under Amon's feet. The effect of her magic would be greatly reduced. Hidden in the glaring light, Celia pressed her staff down. The semi-flowing soil around the ironback king suddenly became incomparably solid, as if it had instantly condensed into layers of rocks, firmly imprisoning it in place. Elmar twisted its body and struggled with all its might. The rock layers on the surface formed by earth elemental magic were cracking, constantly breaking and reforming. The staff in Celia's hand was trembling slightly. This ironback king had great strength, and was naturally proficient in earth elemental magic. Although Celia had tried her best, she could only barely suppress Elmar from breaking out of the ground, and had no time to launch any other attacks. It was also the first time that Elmar had suffered such a setback. It had the ability to run amok in the charcoal marsh, and all the monsters it had encountered were no match for it. Today, before it could show its ability, it was held down by a supreme mage in the air, and could not break out of the ground no matter how hard it struggled. At the same time, Amon and Rulio were engaged in another strange battle. A rock-hard back had appeared under Amon's feet. It was Elmar's back that arched out of the ground, but it had turned into a boat in the dark ocean. The boat had no sails or oars, and it was sailing forward in the dark ocean. The LNG was like a sticky noodle soup, and the further it went, the stronger the resistance. As the song drew nearer, it became clearer and clearer. Ripples spread out, carrying with it the power of rejection, pushing one's body outwards. However, the song had a mysterious alluring power, attracting one's soul to fly towards it. It was an illusion of the separation of the soul and the body. Once the soul lost control and fell into the song, the body would also lose control. Aman raised his arm, and it seemed to have become much heavier than usual. The joints of his whole body were sore and numb in the song, but the feeling was so comfortable that it made one lazy and unwilling to move. Aman pointed to the man playing the flute in the distance and said, "Rulio, I have even withstood the roar of the Lion King. Although your song is magical, it cannot shake my heart. This is your talent, isn't it? Not only can it be used to attack, but it is also a very good means of healing, allowing people to forget pain." Back then, there were 9 kinds of powerful monsters in the Anunnaki divine clan. What is your relationship with the mermaid among them? Rulio was taken aback, and he looked up and replied, "How do you know this legend?" The Mermaid King was also a member of my clan in ancient times. My people built their homes in the sea, and I was an explorer who came to the continent. So that was how it was. Back then, among the 9 kinds of monsters, the Mermaid King was a kind of sea monster. After gaining wisdom and cultivation, he came to the continent and became a divine emissary under the guidance of the Anunnaki divine clan. After the War of the Gods, the Mermaid King disappeared, and this Rulio was also a member of the sea monster clan. Like the Mermaid King, he came to the continent to cultivate. Perhaps in order to obtain various books and help from the mortal world, he became a summoned beast of a supreme mage. Aman laughed, "Your talent is indeed extraordinary. Your strength is even greater than Celia's, but you still have to learn how to master and use it. Unfortunately, you are still no match for me." Aman had already crossed the strange Black Sea and rushed to Rulio, although in the eyes of the onlookers, he was standing there without moving or speaking. Rulio's face was full of panic, and he swam backwards on the sea. He waved the piccolo in his hand and turned it into a brush. With 2 strokes to the left and right, he actually drew a towering mountain on the sea, which just happened to block Aman's path. This was a drawn mountain. It looked real or fake, but Aman didn't care whether it was real or fake. He leaped from the boat and punched out. It was as if the sky had collapsed, and the picture of the mountain was shattered from the middle. He rushed directly in front of Rulio and said with a smile, "So you can draw and sing?" The onlookers let out a low cry of surprise. Aman stood on the back of the struggling King Ironback and looked into the distance. In just a moment, he leaped high and punched out again. The brilliance around Celia was so dazzling that no one could see his figure clearly. Aman's fist carried a ball of golden light and punched a person out of the void. It was Rulio. Everyone heard Ah Meng's words, "So you can paint and sing?" Rulio was shocked. Aman had already broken free from the strange magic he was gifted with, and he punched out again. He pulled out a long, serrated fin-shaped blade from his waist and slashed at Aman's fist. The blade and fist collided with a bang. Aman took 2 steps back, while Rulio was sent flying more than 10 feet away. Then he brandished his blade and rushed over again. This mermaid demon was actually a warrior. If measured according to the physical achievements of the human world, he should be an 8th-level supreme warrior. As for the magical magic he had just displayed, it was his talent, an ability that grew with the growth of his strength. After it was broken by Aman, he could still fight in close combat at this time. Aman punched out again with a trembling impact force. A faint golden light seemed to wrap around the fist and flickered. He used the mining skills of the town of Duk. Aman had used such a punch to kill Prince Snek, but if he didn't want to hurt anyone, he could also disperse the opponent's strength, causing the whole body to be paralyzed and temporarily lose the ability to resist. The fist and the long blade collided for the second time in a very short period of time, but the sound it made was very strange, like something sticky rubbing together. The power of Aman's punch actually produced a strange twist and turn, as if it had hit something slippery. The soil under his feet and the muddy water of the swamp in the distance scattered. This mermaid demon was unexpectedly able to use his innate magic to aid in combat, and was not knocked down by Aman's punch. His body was sent flying, spinning several times in the air, and the soil under his feet surged in a whirlpool. Amon ignored him, turned around and punched again at the center of the dazzling light not far away, attacking Celia. Elmar roared and finally jumped to the ground with the flying soil and stones, raising her claws and long tail and pouncing at Rulio who had just landed. Amon changed his opponent and let the freed Elmar deal with the summoned beast. The dazzling light was an invisible barrier, and Amon's figure rushed into the light, only to see Celia flying backward and revealing her figure. She waved her staff forward as she retreated, and the light suddenly shrank into a transparent light and shadow, firmly imprisoning Amon within it. She was indeed a brilliant supreme mage, and the use of all kinds of methods was extremely reasonable. When Amon was about to break her magic protection, she decisively retreated and used the air elemental imprisonment instead of the air elemental armor with the best defensive effect. The air around Amon instantly became viscous, condensing into a giant cocoon that wrapped him up, and all his movements were greatly restrained. The faster he moved, the greater the invisible resistance he encountered. Under normal circumstances, a supreme mage could make two choices after using this method. One was to quickly fly away so that the warriors couldn't catch up, and the other was to use the method to attack the warriors who were unable to move, or to let the warriors around them launch a counterattack. But this was a duel, and if Celia flew away, it would be tantamount to admitting defeat. Rulio could have taken this opportunity to fight back, but he was currently fighting with Elmar at the edge of the swamp, splashing mud everywhere, and could not find the time to do so. Celia stopped 30 paces away, waved her staff, and countless staff shadows appeared, mixed with fierce white light, layer after layer of counterattacks filled the sky. Amon could not afford to be trapped here and take her attack head-on. The confinement of air was the most difficult to deal with when caught off guard, because it was like a sticky and elastic giant net. Even if a sword cut a hole in it, if it could not completely break the magic, it would immediately close up and block the mage's movement, giving the mage enough time and space to unleash a powerful attack. This Celia was indeed not easy to deal with. She was an outstanding 8th-level supreme mage. The moment Amon was wrapped in the air elemental imprisonment, a slight wry smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He waved his hand and took out a spike-like thing. It was Humbaba's Fong. He, who had been unarmed all this time, finally took out a weapon. The Fong slashed forward with a sharp roar, and with his strength and speed, he opened up a gap and rushed out like lightning. The staff shadows that filled the sky disappeared in the roar. Rulio, who was fighting with Elmar, was swept into the swamp by Elmar's tail because he was distracted. At the critical moment, Rulio waved the sword in his hand and drew 2 strokes. A stone mountain appeared out of thin air in front of Celia, and there were even shrubs growing on it, making it look very real. The mountain appeared to be an illusion. Amon's fangs released a roar that dispersed the afterimages of the staff, before slamming into the mountain with his head. He actually penetrated through the mountain with his brute strength, and smashed the entire mountain into pieces. It all happened in an instant. As soon as Celia waved her staff, Amon rushed in front of her with the Fong in his hand. The supreme mage gritted her teeth and turned her staff like a sword, stabbing it at Amon. She had loved learning swordsmanship since she was a child, and later became a mage. But how could she compare to Amon in close combat? As soon as the staff stabbed out, she felt her vision blur and her wrist go numb. Her staff had been taken away by Amon. Celia knew that she had lost. It was rare for a supreme mage to have her staff taken away by someone else in a fight. She could not help but stand there with a flushed face. On the other side, Rulio was swept into the pool, but Elmar felt that his tail had slipped, as if he had not exerted much force. Rulio rolled in the muddy water and actually grabbed his tail. He swung Elmar's huge body into the air and slammed it into the swamp. Elmar was a little stunned by the slap. He twisted his body and was about to fight back, but he felt the space around him tighten, and then he heard Goliath's voice shouting, "Stop, the duel is over." Rulio's hand that was grabbing Elmar's long tail had already loosened. The ironback shook his big dizzy head and turned around in the muddy water to look up. He saw that Amon was already standing beside Rulio, holding a white crystal staff that was placed on Rulio's neck. Chapter 191. 175. What business do you want to do? An exciting duel was over. Although the crowd did not see the scene of Rulio and Amon fighting, they were still dazzled. This was a duel between the top masters of the continent. After watching the duel, Aruka no longer had the idea of winning against Amon. He thought to himself that if he had been the one on the field, he would not have had a chance of winning at all. Amon, on the other hand, won easily while talking and laughing. Obviously, he did not use his full strength. The captain of Saya's guards, the supreme warrior Myun, was stunned. He was once the captain of the guards at the relay station in the charcoal forest during the flood. He was rescued by Goliath and witnessed the magic of this supreme mage with his own eyes. Later, Goliath became a 9th-level supreme mage and was invincible in commanding the Hittite army. Myun only admired Goliath in his heart and regarded the old man as a godlike existence. Now, there was another Amon. Not only was he a great general whose name shook the nations, his combat prowess was so valiant. Hence, in Muon's heart, Amon had become the second most revered person. As for Celia, she was, of course, convinced of her loss. She knew very well how powerful her summoned beast was, and although the Ironback King that Amon summoned wasn't weak, it obviously didn't help much. It was basically just there to join in the fun. She was able to put it down. When her staff was taken away, her face was flushed, but after the duel was over, she was relieved and returned to the table to toast Amon. Celia looked at Amon and felt extremely regretful. It was not because she lost, but because it was a pity that a talent like Amon was not used by Hittite. When she toasted, she could not help but say, "Supreme General, you have left Igut, and it is impossible for you to go back, not to mention that the Empire of Igut will send masters to hunt you down. You once led an army to fight against Hittite and captured the former king alive. However, you were also the one who facilitated the peace talks between the two countries and received the respect of the soldiers from both sides. Now that King Ashur has succeeded to the throne, the political situation in Hittite has returned to normal, and they are in urgent need of talents like you. Saya is your hometown. Since you're back, why not serve your hometown? Please reconsider the suggestions of Lord Goliath and Governor Shmuel. I am also a court supreme mage and a member of the Hittite royal family. I can jointly recommend you. King Ashur himself appreciates you very much, and you will definitely be put in an important position in Hittite." Amon looked at his glass and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Princess Celia. I have also come to serve my hometown this time. I have just made an agreement with Lord Goliath, and I have won this duel. Now, it is time to talk about our agreement, and I would like to ask for your help, Your Highness." Celia was Ashur's cousin, and after Ashur succeeded to the throne, he conferred her the title of Princess of the Kingdom, but to be honest, an ordinary princess of the kingdom was not as honorable as a supreme mage, so everyone still called her the Supreme Mage. Now that Amon had changed the way he addressed her, there was obviously a hidden meaning. Governor Shmuel spoke up, "Supreme General, you just said that you have a business to discuss with us. What kind of business is it that you need to discuss with us? If you want wealth or territory, just ask for it. There is no need to start a business yourself to earn money." Amon smiled, "The business I want to discuss is not to earn money myself, but to let Saya earn money. The town of Duk is my hometown, and as you all know very well, Saya has now lost control of the plains of Duk, and its northern and southeastern corners have city-states established by the Kingdom of Assyria and the Kingdom of Babylon respectively. That 1,000 miles of fertile land has been gradually developed over the long years, and in the future, it will be able to accommodate hundreds of thousands or even millions of people. It is rich and beautiful, but it is bound to be accompanied by human disputes. I do not want the city of Salem, where my friends and people live, to be destroyed before it is fully built, so I need support. The business I want to discuss is of course related to this, and the first is to build a road." Amon moved the utensils away, took out a map, and placed it on the table, drawing a winding road from their current location to the eastern end of the charcoal forest. He hoped to hire workmen from the city of Saya to pave the way, to build embankments and fill in the road along the route, to the extent that 2 wagons could pass at a time, and to build 3 stations on the open ground between the swamps for the passing caravans to rest. Naturally, he could not let the workers work for nothing, and Aman would pay them enough. Governor Shmuel looked at it for a long time, and said in a deep voice, "This project is big enough, I wonder how long it will take to repair it." Aman said with a faint smile, "Since I have come to you for help and am willing to pay a lot of money, naturally the sooner the better. I hope to repair it within 3 months. Governor Shmuel shook his head and said, "It is unlikely that it will be so fast. Organizing manpower is one thing, but there is no road through the swamp, and there is no way to get local materials. Many things have to be transported from all over the city, and it is very difficult to push in bit by bit." Goliath looked at the map and added, "If someone opens a narrow road that can be walked in advance, and then organizes enough manpower to strengthen and widen it later, it is not impossible to complete it in 3 months. Aman, this road is winding, and seems to be only suitable for trade, not for military campaigns." Aman spread his hands, "There is no other way, this is the charcoal forest. To be able to find such a road is already the credit of the king Ironback. Its name is Elmar, and it has lived in the swamp since it was a child. Elmar, say hello to everyone." After the duel, Elmar had been crawling on the open ground beside the swamp, and when he heard Aman's call, he raised his huge body and nodded to everyone. Governor Shmuel frowned again and said, "This requires a large number of people to be recruited in the name of the authorities. How will we explain this to the capital?" Aman pointed to the plains of Duk on the map and said, "You have been governor for many years. There used to be only one town of Duk, with more than 2,000 inhabitants, and most of the daily necessities had to be transported from outside, but that small place was already an important source of tax for Saya. Now there are city-states established there, but the city-states of Assur and Babylon will not bring you any benefits, only this city of Salem can cooperate. The original town of Duk only had a population of more than 2,000, and excluding the old, the weak, and the children, there were no more than 800 registered miners at most, but the parangons and iron smelted by them were already important products of Saya. The area was rich in resources, and there were mineral veins in the nearby mountains, which the Dushians had long known, but they did not have that many people to mine, so they only chose the area with the richest mineral deposits and the easiest to mine to build mines. If the plains of Duk were to be fully reclaimed in the future, it would be enough to accommodate hundreds of thousands of people, and even the current city of Salem could provide tens of thousands of people. If this city-state were to develop, the one who would benefit the most would be Saya, because the products there had to be transported out, and the materials needed had to be transported in. After passing through this road that Aman wanted to open, not only would there be the benefits of trade, but it would also increase a lot of tax revenue. In the years after the Great Flood, Saya had been very stable under Goliath's rule, but after 2 wars and the loss of such an important source of tax revenue as the town of Duk, it was clearly not as prosperous and affluent as it used to be. Now Aman provided another opportunity to open up a source of revenue, but the status of the city of Salem was already different from that of the former town of Duk. The city of Salem not only needed reinforcements, but also more people. Vagrants who had lost their land in Saya, LNG explorers who were trying their luck, and bankrupt craftsmen could all enter Salem from here to look for opportunities, and as long as they obeyed the management there, they would be welcomed. The more prosperous the city of Salem was, the more prosperous this trade route would be, and the greater the profits of Saya would be. The reason why Aman wanted to talk about this matter in person was that the ownership of the city of Salem was very delicate. It was not under the jurisdiction of the Hittite kingdom, but only in a relationship of trade and mutual benefit. Nominally, the Hittite kingdom might not openly accept it, but the fact that 3 city-states had been established on the plains of Duk was also a fact that the Hittite kingdom could not stop. Aman's cooperation plan had 3 steps. The first step was to pay a large sum of money to hire people to build roads in Saya. The second step was to organize a large trading firm in Iga to transport supplies through Saya's checkpoint, and to do business with the city of Salem through this trade route. They would need to pass through Saya, and they would pay a toll tax in accordance with the regulations. The third step was for Saya to be able to carry out the flow of people and trade with the city of Salem. Although Shmuel was the governor, he did not dare to agree to this easily, so he needed to talk to Goliath. If Goliath supported Amon's proposal, with his status and prestige in the Hittite kingdom, even King Ashur would not be able to object. Everyone was not in a position to express their stance, and they all looked at Goliath with questioning eyes. Goliath stroked his goatee and said, "In the duel just now, did Amon win?" Celia replied with a wry smile, "Of course it was Supreme General Amon who won, you were the arbiter." Goliath then said to Shmuel, "Then we have to keep our word, the governors of several states need not worry, whether the Hittite kingdom is willing or not, a city has already been established on the plains of Duk, and we are powerless to intervene. At least having this road is better than not having it at all, it is beneficial for the present and even more beneficial for the future, so in the name of Amon paying people to build the road, we will first open this trade route. We have a peace and trade agreement with Igut, so naturally we should also allow their caravans to pass through. If everything goes well, it would be better if we could do more business ourselves. Let's just treat it as a civilian trade, and Saya should acquiesce." Governor Shmuel nodded and said, "Since you have made your stand so, then let's do it this way. In terms of practical benefits, Saya will also benefit. No wonder you asked me to bring the 2 directors and the clerk with me, it turns out that you had already thought of this." Amon stood up and raised his glass, "Then let's have a happy cooperation in the future." Goliath also raised his glass and said, "Hold your celebration, the Supreme General's request for such a tight time, presumably Salem is also under a lot of pressure at the moment, and the conflict on the plains of Duk will soon arrive. Saya can recruit people to build the trade route as soon as possible, but the prerequisite is that the Supreme General still needs to open a path in front of us that can be traveled." Amon nodded and said, "I will do it right away, and the road will be opened within a month. As for the people of Saya, they don't have to worry about where I have gone, just follow that road to level and widen it." Goliath also nodded and said, "Of course I trust what the Supreme General says, then Saya will immediately go and organize the manpower and supplies, it won't be long before work starts." Raphael said, "There are now 3 city-states on the plains of Duk, the city of Enlil built by Assyria, the city of Marduk built by Babylon, and Supreme General Amon did not have the support of a kingdom, but he also guided people to build the city of Salem. I am very curious about this city that seems to have appeared out of thin air, and I hope to go and see it for myself." Celia also said, "I also want to go and see the excitement, it's like a miracle." Amon smiled and said, "You are welcome to Salem as guests, but it would be best to wait until the road is built, then everything will be convenient." Raphael replied, "Supreme General, you can rest assured, since Teacher Goliath has agreed to cooperate with Salem, then this road will definitely be built within 3 months, as long as the old man says the word." After talking about the cooperation, everyone raised their glasses and drank heartily, and during the dinner, they talked about all kinds of things they had seen and heard in the war between the kingdoms, especially when Amon witnessed the final fate of Enkidu in the casserole on the battlefield. Everyone listened with emotion, but at the same time, their hearts were filled with unknown doubts. After the banquet, Goliath did not leave immediately, he asked Amon to talk. That night, the huge body of the king Ironback floated lazily in the swamp, while Raphael stood on its back, looking at the mud around him with interest. No one knew what he was studying. This noble supreme mage and the king Ironback had just met, but they actually got along quite well, they could talk in their souls, and Elmar was willing to take Raphael around the charcoal forest, telling him where there was good food to eat. On a strange rock protruding from the swamp in the distance, Goliath and Amon stood side by side, talking through message magic. Goliath asked, "Do you know what happened to the fall of Enkidu?" There were only a few people in the world who could make Amon reveal secrets without reservation, except for Schrödinger who had left, Maria who was far away in Igut, and the last one was the supreme mage Goliath in front of him. It was interesting to say that they were once enemies who led armies to fight on the battlefield, but Goliath was a friend of Crazy Ol and a respected elder of Amon. Amon replied frankly, "I didn't know it at the time, but later, because of a special experience, I understood that it was the test of fate, the judgment of the end of days, the ultimate consequence of a life's choice. Please forgive me for not being able to explain it to you too clearly, because it may not be good for you to know it. But I can tell you that if a mortal wants to become a true god who transcends eternal life, that is a test that must be passed. Goliath was slightly taken aback. You mean that Enkidu has reached the end of the human realm and may become a god? Amon sighed. Yes, he already has that kind of achievement, but unfortunately he did not succeed, but he has a clear conscience in this life. Your original assumption may be right. Whether it is a mage like you or a warrior like Enkidu, when they reach the end of the human realm, it is possible for them to touch the light of the divine realm, but this hope is too remote and too accidental. I once told you about the power of two sides, but when I was in Igut, I realized that there is no such thing as two sides. Power and body and mind are one. A warrior or a mage may also reach the end of the human realm because of superhuman luck, talent, and perseverance, but there are many missing contents in the secret books of practice in the world. Unless the body and mind have unintentionally met the requirements of these tests, it is impossible to take the final step. The 9th level of the power of origin has a seemingly endless life, and although the 9th level supreme mages in the human realm live a long life, they cannot be compared to the messengers of the gods. Goliath asked again, the messengers of the gods? Amon smiled. Some so-called gods, such as myself today, can already be called a god in myths and legends, just like Humbaba was once called the god of the Euphrates River. But there is still a difference between this and the true gods who transcend eternal life. As for what the difference is, I have not yet verified it. Of course, this requires the 9th level of the power of origin. Not all messengers can reach this level, they only understand the secrets of the power of origin. After saying this, Amon stopped talking, waiting for Goliath to ask. Regarding the secret of the power of origin, if Goliath did not ask, Amon would not take the initiative to say it, but if Goliath wanted to know, Amon would not hide it. He could tell Goliath the secret. As for the guidance of faith, that was up to Goliath. Even if he knew the secret, it did not mean that he could become a god. Goliath did not pursue the matter. Instead, he sighed and said, Amen, if you want to open up this road, what you want is not only resources, but more importantly, population, right? Attracting the poor vagrants of Hittite and Iga to settle in the city of Salem, so that they could have a growing power to fight against the other two city-states. From a human point of view, I'm even willing to send unemployed soldiers back to their hometowns. With a bit of organization, they can become an army. But there is one question, if you do that, for whom are you going to build a shrine in Salem? Amon replied simply, the city of Salem has already built a shrine for goddess Murin, just like the original town of Duk. I don't think anyone can have any objections, right? As for my people, they have their own gods. Perhaps in another era, in another place, people might not understand what Amon and Galia were saying, but in the heavens pivot continent at that time, faith in the gods was an essential source of spiritual support for people. Toiling day in and day out, living in this world, what difference was there between them and the beasts without intelligence, or the walking corpses without intelligence? That was the yearning and hope in people's hearts. The world was material, but people lived in the spiritual. If a person lost his sense of taste, the best delicacies in the world would be meaningless to him, and if he lost his vision, no matter how beautiful the colors were, they would no longer be gorgeous. This was the meaning of faith. It was not necessarily a debate about whether there was a God or not, but a belief in the meaning of existence. Regardless of whether gods existed or not, people needed the sustenance of gods or symbols of gods in their hearts, so that they could face the suffering of life and the unknowns of the world. On the other hand, the royal power relied on the divine power, which was also conducive to the rule of the kingdoms, so that the human emperors had a self-evident transcendent status. With the combination of the two, every city-state on the continent had its own shrine. No matter what Amon did, it could not be divorced from reality. A city-state must have a shrine in order to be stable, the only difference was which god or what kind of god they believed in. Chapter 192. 176. The road under your feet. Amon was taken aback and replied somewhat awkwardly, did they really build the shrine like that? I did appear there with Murin in my arms, and they actually carved a statue just like that. I don't care, this is the consequence of what I did, it's just that the consequences are a bit funny. Amon was a little stunned at first when he heard that the god on the altar of the shrine that Link had built in the city of Salem was actually the image of him holding Murin in his arms, but after thinking about it, he just smiled, not minding it or feeling proud of it. His view on this issue was not quite the same as that of ordinary people, and it naturally didn't matter if Link did not erect a statue for him, and he wouldn't blame him if he did. After all, wouldn't he dare to take responsibility for what he did? Besides, he had already passed the test of endless life and death, and had the 9th level of the power of origin, so there was nothing wrong with erecting a statue in the shrine, and the fact that Murin did not show up to cause trouble showed that she was not dissatisfied, as long as she was willing. Goliath laughed enough, and then said seriously, as early as a few years ago, I tried to use the legendary Great Prophecy once, and realized that the plains of Duk would become 1,000 miles of fertile land, but it would also cause disputes between the gods and the surrounding countries. You and I both know the origin of the flood, and Enril has turned the plains of Duk back into fertile land, allowing hundreds of thousands of people to live in peace, and is indeed praised by the people. Amon snorted coldly and said, I naturally know that if you hadn't led the people to resist the flood back then, Saya would have been destroyed too. Goliath's expression was faintly sad. I was one who was used by Enril, and I used to admire him so much. We had played 2 games of chess, and I myself was also a chess piece on the god's chessboard. Even I had used the Great Prophecy to come to this conclusion, so how could the god who started the flood not know? Enril is bound to let his people occupy that fertile land and fill the plains of Duk with his shrines. Amon asked in a noncommittal tone, do you think he can succeed? Goliath looked up at the sky. In Enril's vision, he only had to consider whether Marduk would agree or not. Although I was unwilling to serve him anymore, I still commanded the army to repel the army of Babylon. This was what I had to do. The Assyrian kingdom sending the giant legion to suddenly cross the plateau and appear in the plains of Duk should have been a well-prepared plan, and no one had expected it in advance. The Assyrian kingdom wanted to expand their territory, and their main god was Enril. Only now did I understand that Enril's most important chess piece was the Assyrian kingdom. His calculations are really good. No matter how many wise men there are on the continent, they are still no match for him. This is what a god should be like. Amon sighed somewhat helplessly. Of course Marduk would do it. There was a mage named Usur who united the highland giant tribe and built the city of Marduk on the throat in the southeast corner of the plains of Duk. Enril probably thought of this long ago, and the Assyrian kingdom in the north also built the city of Enril. Judging from the local battlefield, Marduk would not be a match for Enril, and the Assyrian kingdom would occupy the entire plains of Duk from the north to the south and eventually defeat Marduk. Goliath smiled bitterly. Judging from the situation at the time, this should have been a reasonable prophecy, but it was not the reality. Even the high and mighty god Enril did not control everything. The biggest variable now is the emergence of Salem. You do not have the support of a kingdom like the others, but you have established a city in the middle of the plains of Duk, which is beyond the expectations of the gods. Amon sneered. Enril would definitely not want to see Salem appear there. Goliath turned his head and said, that may not be the case, the heart of the gods is unpredictable, it depends on whether you are willing to build his shrine or not. Amon asked in return, Honorable Supreme Mage, you were once the chief priest of the Enril Shrine, and now you are the chief honorary elder of the Hittite Academy of Magic, but you don't seem to have a good impression of the king of the kingdom, Enril. Goliath replied, it's more than a bad impression, I know that there are many priests who do not give their hearts to the gods, they only satisfy their vanity and lust in the name of the gods on earth. But I am different, I once sincerely believed in the gods and devoutly waited for the gods to summon me. I am not as lucky as you to have hugged the goddess in public at a young age. I have been a priest for so many years, but I have only really interacted with the gods once, and that was when the flood besieged Saya, when I heard Enril's voice in the shrine. It was a voice I had been looking forward to for many years, and it's funny to say that when I really saw him, I began to distance myself from him. Amon said, even you have distanced yourself from him, how can I let his shrine stand in Salem? I would rather have my statue hug the goddess Murin and stand on the altar for Enril to take a good look at. Goliath grinned. Is that statue a silent mockery? You are still a little childish after all, and doing so is like being angry. Have you ever thought that maybe it's not worth it? The cost of stopping Enril's wishes may be great. Amon narrowed his eyes in the moonlight and said, one must always persevere, and some things must be done even though they are known to be difficult, otherwise what is the point of living in this world? Goliath looked at him. You have the shadow of Nietzsche in you, but you are not him. Amon suddenly asked again, the kingdom of Assyria and the Hittite kingdom believe in the same god, Enril. What is the relationship between the two countries? Goliath replied, the relationship between the two countries is very tense, and the potential conflicts are very intense, many of which are precisely because they believe in the same god. Both kings claim that they are the real incarnation of Enril on earth, and if it weren't for the fact that the strategic focus of the Hittite kingdom over the past few decades has been to get rid of the control of the empire of Igut, I'm afraid a war would have broken out with Assyria long ago. Amon frowned. Both kingdoms believe in Enril, but claim that they are the true faith. If they start fighting and killing each other, what will the gods think? Goliath looked at the dark swamp jungle. Is the Enril in their eyes the real Enril? At least in my eyes, there is another Enril. I once wrote secret letters to both Gilgamesh and Rod-Dik, hoping to establish a peaceful city-state before foreseeing the changes that would take place in the plains of Duk, but it didn't work, and it was actually impossible to succeed. Now you have done more than I have, and have established the city of Salem, but it has become the center of the conflict. Amon, even without the city of Salem that I built, would the plains of Duk not have bloodshed and strife? Goliath shook his head. It would have, and even if there were no gods, the kingdoms on earth would not have given up the struggle. Amen, you have even hugged a goddess, and your own achievements are already equivalent to many gods in the legends, so in the eyes of the gods, how do you think they would view a dispute like this in the plains of Duk? Amon was silent for a long time, as if thinking hard, and only after a long time did he reply, how people coexist is decided by people themselves, and it may not be the will of one person, but it is the sum of the will of all people. If all people are seen as one person, then the strife in the world is the inner conflict of this person, the struggle and entanglement of countless selves, just as people often have all kinds of contradictions in their hearts, and will feel all kinds of depression. This may be a realm that only the gods have, and I can only describe it and not prove it, because after all, I am not a god yet. Goliath nodded and said, we are just talking about it. If it is really possible to transcend all this in training, perhaps many gods cannot do it. Amon, I am willing to help the city of Salem against the invasion of the kingdom of Assyria, but I also need your help. Amon, if you have something to say, just say it, there is no need to mention help. Goliath, I will send my student Raphael to follow you and help you open the way in the swamp. It will also be a kind of experience for him. Amon, as long as he does not find it difficult and dangerous, then he can follow me to open the way. From beginning to end, Goliath did not open his mouth to ask Amon what was the source of power that the gods had mastered. This made Amon deeply admire Goliath. It seemed that there were almost no unexpected disturbances in this world that could shake Goliath's heart. Goliath had his own beliefs and path, and the so-called love was not just about status and wealth in the world. A large number of people recruited by Saya arrived at the eastern shore of the inland lake, at the southern end of the charcoal marsh. Amon had already left, but a path had appeared in the swamp, winding around areas that were difficult to pass through, cutting away thorns to fill in the low-lying areas, and extending into the depths of the swamp, just wide enough for two people to walk side by side. There was no need for maps, no need for people to explore the way. People laid the roadbed with gravel and dry soil, uprooted the bushes and thorns on both sides, and filled in the swamp. Using the trees cut on the spot as fire, the soil on the road was baked into a half-dry state, and continued to push forward, building a solid road that could allow two carriages to walk side by side. Not to mention how the people were rushing to build the road. Amon was moving forward in the depths of the charcoal marsh, standing on the shoulder of the king Ironback, El March. El Mar's huge body was more than 10 feet long, and compared to the average ironback, its body was relatively thin, and the place its belly swam through was just the width of 2 people. No matter what the terrain ahead, the big ironback crawled past, leaving a path behind it. Looking ahead, Aman was holding a very special staff or weapon, which was Humbaba's tusk. He stood on the back of the king ironback and gently waved the tusk, like a warrior's scimitar or longsword. A faint golden light swept past, and the strange rocks in the way were turned to dust. When it encountered a low-lying area, a strange power surged, and the soil in the distance rolled up to fill in a passage. Elmar waved its front claws from time to time as it moved forward, the sharp shadows of its claws turning into cold glints, uprooting the bushes and throwing them to the sides, and its long tail constantly fell from the air, slapping the road behind it. Raphael walked behind with his staff in hand, and the impassable charcoal marsh was now a passable path under his feet. Raphael volunteered to follow Aman to clear the way. He also wanted to see how this legendary figure of the continent would create another miracle, but at first he didn't find anything strange. The sword light emitted by Aman's tusk was the martial technique of a 9th-level supreme warrior, and the mud that surged up to fill in the swamps and depressions encountered along the way was the simplest low-level earth elemental magic, which almost every supreme warrior who had undergone the second awakening of power could do. Aman's power was nothing more than extraordinary, and for him, these were just ordinary means. But as a day passed, Raphael began to feel surprised, and as the second day passed, this surprise turned into shock, and by the third day, this shock finally turned into deep admiration. What Ah Ming did seemed simple at the beginning, but in the end, it became the most complicated thing. Uprooting bushes, smashing Luan stones, filling in the swamps, these were not magical, ordinary people could do it, the only difference was the speed of the means. But the Supreme General, the 9th-level Supreme Warrior, and the top powerhouse of the continent were doing such trivial things. Once he started, he didn't stop. For several days and nights, not to mention rest, even the speed of his advance did not change. Some areas were very complicated and difficult to clear, while some areas were relatively easier, but Aman commanded Elmar to move forward at the same speed, neither too fast nor too slow. This was not fighting on the battlefield, where there was neither the enemy's pressure nor the soldiers' shouts of encouragement. It was so lonely and boring in the endless jungle swamps. The endless repetition of the simplest work, using the power that could shake the continent, was almost unbearably boring. Raphael had never seen anyone in such a boring situation who could do such a boring job so calmly without getting tired of it, as if they would never stop. Another 3 days passed, and Aman didn't even say a word. Raphael couldn't describe his feelings. He vaguely saw the shadow of his teacher, Goliath, in Aman. When the flood besieged Saya, Goliath also walked around the city silently for many days, holding a staff in his hand to preside over the defensive formation, and constantly operating magic to strengthen the city walls to block the flood. When the flood receded, he could barely stand. But Ah Meng's situation was different from Golier's. There was no sense of crisis, nor was there anyone's eagerness. There was no need for it. He was doing it on his own in the uninhabited swamp. The road stretched on, winding for an unknown length, and the gloomy charcoal forest seemed to be an abyss with no hope. Aman continuously used martial arts and magic, and his endurance and concentration were beyond the reach of ordinary supreme warriors. Raphael didn't stay idle behind. Since he volunteered to help, Goliath also sent him. Before setting off, Aman gave Raphael a task, to deal with any accidents that might appear at any time in the swamps. Aman concentrated on opening the road and didn't want to be disturbed. Now that there were many monsters in the charcoal swamp, if they launched a surprise attack, Raphael would deal with it. Ordinary beasts would have been frightened away when they heard the noise, but some monsters with strong attacks would occasionally attack, but Raphael would casually deal with them. The most troublesome monsters along the way were the giant water demons that lived here, some of which were thicker than the mouth of a bull, and would become fierce after being disturbed. This kind of giant water demon could swallow an adult, and its powerful body could entangle a strong bull to death. It was very difficult to find them lurking in the swamp, and when it suddenly sprang up, it caught people off guard. Raphael had to use detection magic at all times, and in 6 days, he encountered more than a dozen fierce giant water demons. Although they could not be a match for a supreme mage, following them for 6 days and 6 nights in a row made Raphael tired. Seeing that Amon had no intention of stopping, the young supreme mage finally spoke. "Supreme General, I suggest you take a break. You can only last long with tension and relaxation, and it's more efficient than exhausting all your strength at once." Amon smiled and said, "You're right, that's why I haven't been doing my best. Although the current speed is much slower than opening the road at full strength, in terms of continuous effect, it's the highest efficiency." Raphael exclaimed, "Supreme General, you've exceeded my expectations. It's not just your strength that's powerful. Although you haven't done your best, I'm worried that Elmar can't take it." "Amon, Elmar is a mutant Ironback king, it's innately powerful and incomparable to humans." Raphael still advised, "That depends on who it's compared to, it can't be compared to you, Supreme General. At this speed, it will never be able to persevere until the road is completely opened." Amon said without turning his head, "Your judgment is correct, I didn't intend to let Elmar help me open all the roads. My plan was to walk at the same speed to the other side in 1 month. Elmar would collapse from exhaustion when I was halfway there. I just wanted to be exhausted, to have a good experience, and to take this opportunity to let it experience a kind of test. Raphael, if Elmar is exhausted and unable to move forward, it will be very dangerous to stay in the charcoal marsh." Amon smiled again, "That's why I promised Goliath to bring you here. With the protection of a supreme mage like you, Elmar should have no problem recuperating and recovering in the swamp. You stay in the swamp to protect it, and I'll continue to open the road alone." Raphael was stunned. "So your plan is to open the back of the road by yourself, and only let me and Elmar help the front half?" Amon said meaningfully, No, this road is one in my eyes, there is no such thing as half or the other. You are helping me open the whole road." "Supreme Mage, leaving you in the middle of the charcoal marsh just to protect an Ironback, isn't that an insult to your noble status?" Raphael hurriedly explained, "No, if this is the help you need, I'd be happy to." Amon looked down at Elmar, who was still struggling to open the way, and for some reason, suddenly changed his mind. He turned back and said, "Then let's rest for a day, you're tired. We'll open the road at this speed, walk for 6 days and rest for 1 day, and we should be able to reach the other end in a month." Raphael said, "I can still hold on." Amon smiled, "You're really tired, Elmar has already reminded me, let's rest for a day." Chapter 193. 177, Bright Moonlit Night. Originally, Armand wanted Elmar to lead the way continuously for half a month. Since she rested twice on the way, Elmar eventually persisted for 20 days. The place they arrived at was an open area in the swamp. There was a small hill that rose out of the ground, covered with soft grass slopes, and colorful flowers bloomed in the bushes. In the future, they would build a rest station here for caravans. Elmar stayed here to rest. Armand set up a magic formation and left a tent. He asked Raphael to stay here to protect Elmar as well. The next day, he set off alone again. At this time, the strength and willpower that Armand had honed over a long period of training and experience could be seen. He continued to open the way. The work that Elmar and Raphael had done previously was done by him alone, but the speed of his advance remained the same. Brambles and thorns, gravel and fill in the soil, his footsteps were firm. From time to time, there would be attacks from monsters. Armand brandished his tusks to fight them, and at the same time, his footsteps did not falter. He walked day after day. Armand was not deliberately making things difficult for himself. He was very clear that people could actually do a lot of things, as long as they had great perseverance. However, this was something that too many people in the world could not do. Armand walked alone for another 3 days. It rained in the charcoal swamp, and the wind blew between the trees. On the 3rd night, it finally cleared up, and a bright round moon hung in the sky. Armand strode through the swamp jungle, leaving behind an endless path. The moonlight in the sky seemed to be a gentle bath, and the gloomy charcoal swamp became a little more tranquil and serene. The surroundings were so quiet. There was almost no sound in the distance except for the movements of Armand opening the way. Amon, who was advancing unhurriedly, suddenly brandished its tusks. A faint golden brilliance streaked out in an arc towards the front left. Coincidentally, a massive silhouette pounced out soundlessly from the swamp. Struck by the golden brilliance, the silhouette let out a muffled roar before crashing heavily into the muddy water. It was yet another giant water gloom that launched a sneak attack. It was easily subdued by Armand as soon as it launched its attack. He had encountered it several times along the way, but it did not pose a threat. It did not even interrupt his footsteps. But this time, it was obviously vastly different. Amon halted his footsteps for the first time as he brandished his fangs, before hurriedly turning around and brandishing his fangs towards his right rear. Yet there was no movement, nor was there any sign of the enemy. The fangs streaked across the air. The cold night air seemed to have transformed into water as ripples spread out. The scenery of the swamp and the forest swayed amidst the ripples. A human figure appeared out of thin air above the seemingly empty swamp. He had suddenly revealed himself while stealthily, wielding a spiked weapon. He leapt into the air and silently stabbed towards Amon. This person's figure could not be considered burly, but the figure that pounced over looked extremely valiant, like a sword that had been shot from a fully drawn bow. The weapon in his hand was grayish-white and lusterless. It looked like half a spear, but also a long spike. There was an assassin, and the assassin's timing was perfect. He attacked at the same time as the giant water gloom in front of him. The water gloom was a cold-blooded animal that lived in the swamp. The water gloom that Amon encountered just now was a mutated giant water gloom. It was born with the ability to blend its aura with the environment, making it very difficult to detect before launching an attack. However, the assassin was even more stealthy than the water gloom. Although he was suddenly in danger, Amon could not help but admire this assassin. This was the most outstanding assassin he had encountered so far. Not only was he good at lurking, he was also patient enough to wait for the right moment to strike, making use of the environment to coordinate with the assassination. Amon was the first to discover the giant water gloom. He only noticed the danger behind him after making his move, and was almost caught off guard. This assassin should have been following him for a long time. When Amon was suddenly attacked by the giant water gloom while he was walking, the assassin took the opportunity to strike from behind. This attack was almost impossible to defend against. Amon swung his fangs, and the assassin was like a shadow under the moonlight. When he appeared, he was already in front of Amon. The fangs collided with the short stinger, and a shockwave spread out between the two. A huge gully appeared on the ground, extending to both sides of the swamp. Muddy water splashed up in an instant, as if it had been plowed by an invisible giant plow. Amon took 2 steps back before regaining his balance. The fangs in his hand buzzed. The assassin also bounced back under the impact of this huge force. He somersaulted in the air, landed on the ground, and disappeared in a flash. Amon stomped his feet and flew into the air. He used detection magic to scan the dark swamp jungle, and found that the assassin had left a faint trace in the muddy water and air, but the assassin had disappeared. In such a short time, the assassin could not escape too far, so he went into hiding again. He was so well hidden that Amon could not find him even if he used detection magic in mid-air. The only way to find him was to use a large-scale indiscriminate attack to turn the entire swamp upside down. Amon could only get close enough to find him. But if Amon really did that, and made such a big commotion in such a large area, if he searched in the wrong direction, the assassin might have slipped away in another direction. Amon hovered in the air for a moment, before slowly descending to the ground. The path he had opened up was cut off by a deep ditch, a testament to the danger he had just encountered. The moonlight shone on the ditch, and the surroundings remained serene and peaceful. Amon waved his hand, and earth and stones surged up to fill the ditch. Then he turned around and made an incredible decision, to continue opening the road. Aman was here to open the road, and even if he encountered the most terrifying assassin in the world, he still did not change his original intention. Since the assassin could not be found, he continued to do his own thing. Aman walked in the moonlight, leaving the winding road behind him. He was guessing the origin of the assassin. It seemed that someone did not want him to open this road, or did not want him to enter the plains of Duk himself. Who sent the assassin? He recalled the various divine emissaries of the Ennead one by one from Schrödinger's experience. Which of them was good at assassination? But no matter how he thought about it, it did not match up with the assassin he had just seen. Aman could not unleash his strongest attack in a moment of desperation, but he also knew that it was not something an ordinary person could withstand. That assassin, on the other hand, had taken the attack head-on. Although he did not have the upper hand, he was unscathed. He even borrowed the force of the impact to fly away, concealing his whereabouts in the shortest time possible. He was silent before he struck, and he disappeared without a trace after one missed strike. This was a superclass assassin in the world. The power used by that person was very special, and it was not a simple martial art or magic. From the looks of it, he should be an emissary from a certain divine clan. For such an assassin to assassinate Aman at this time, the god behind it was most likely Enlil. Aman knew that Igut had also sent pursuers, which made him very helpless. The pursuers were his benefactor, Gabriel, and his friend, George, and these two were obviously not the assassin just now. Seth had already sent out the Lion King, so there was no need for other divine emissaries to act, not to mention that this place was already Enlil's territory. The assassin must still be lurking in the charcoal marsh, not far from Aman, waiting for a better opportunity to strike. Being targeted by such an assassin, if it was someone else, even if they did not panic, they would be cautious and look for a safe place to hide and wait until dawn before leaving via a safe route. For Aman, he could even fly directly out of the charcoal marsh. But Aman did nothing, as if he was silently declaring to the assassin in the dark, "Whether you assassinate me or not, I will open the way here." Was this a kind of contempt and ridicule? Aman might not have such a meaning, but it depended on what the assassin thought. Moving forward, he passed a large body of water with floating dead branches and rotten leaves. There were many strange trees in the water, like arms stretching out from the mud at the bottom of the water, as if trying to grab something in the air. This was the most suitable environment for ambush and assassination, but Aman walked over without making a sound. The soil surged under his feet and was instantly roasted and burned by fire magic. A path appeared on the water overgrown with strange trees, extending straight ahead. Aman walked for a long time before setting foot on dry land. There was no movement around, and the assassin did not attack. He seemed to have given up. Had he already left? Ming stepped onto dry land. It was a small slope with dense shrubs as tall as two people. Along the way, there were also jagged rocks of strange shapes. He gently waved the tusk in his hand, uprooting the bushes and sending them flying to both sides. The strange rocks blocking the road were also smashed by the sword and filled into the roadbed. As Aman walked, trees and gravel flew everywhere. It was a very impressive sight. Aman did not find anything unusual. As he walked, he passed by a section of bushes that was not too dangerous. Aman swung his tusk and smashed a pile of rocks growing on top of the bushes. The flying gravel did not fall to the ground, but suddenly exploded, like countless whistling arrows flying towards Aman. Someone suddenly channeled magic power when Aman smashed the pile of rocks, controlling the gravel to rain down on him. Each flying gravel carried a powerful force, and when it scattered all over the sky, it could annihilate the detection magic. Aman's reaction was extremely fast. He reached out and grabbed forward, and a huge shield appeared out of thin air in his palm. It had a faint halo around it, and was condensed from the air element. The gravel hit the shield with a loud bang. Small pieces of flying gravel were directly bounced back, while the larger ones seemed to be wrapped in a viscous force and slid to the ground. Aman's flying gravel once again appeared in the sky. The short shuttle in his hand stabbed fiercely into the air elemental shield, and with a spiraling force, it shattered. Amon's protective magic was broken, and the man swooped down from above, and the shuttle slashed down in an arc under the moonlight. This attack was too sudden, and the force was stronger than the last. Amon snorted and swung his tusk to block. The weapons of the two did not directly collide. Golden light spread out from the bushes, and the sound of rolling thunder could be heard. The hillside was in trouble. Branches and leaves swept up sand and stones. It was like two supreme warriors fighting on the battlefield, and it was a head-on fight. The man's attack was extremely fast, and his figure was also extremely agile. He looked like a fleeting shadow under the moonlight, and when he swung his spikes, they left arcs of light in the air, and the force of each blow was so strong. Amon shouted in a low voice, "Who sent you, and who are you?" As he spoke, the tusk in his hand slashed continuously with golden light, and he steadily walked up the hillside step by step. A powerful pressure had already locked onto the assassin. From the foot of the hill to the high slope, the rolling thunder continued all the way, and the man was forced back again and again by Amon. The assassin spoke in a cold voice, "My name is Bright Moon Knight, and I am the emissary of God. No matter how strong the person I want to assassinate, no matter where they hide, and no matter how far they escape, they will not be able to escape. You are really amazing, and you are still alive. But no matter how you struggle, you will be killed by me sooner or later. I never fail." This man's tone was arrogant. Judging from his methods, he did have the capital to be arrogant. But it seemed a little ridiculous for him to say such words now, because it was obvious that Amon had the upper hand and was forcing him back step by step. Amon sneered, "The emissary of God, Bright Moon Knight? The moon is indeed round today, and the moonlight is beautiful, but you seem to have forgotten what you are doing. I don't want to hide at all, and I won't run away. No matter who you are, who sent you, no matter how far you want to run, or where you hide, I will find you." The man shouted, "Do you really think I'm afraid of you, Amon?" Amon shook his head and said, "I don't need you to be afraid of me, I just want to catch you." As they spoke, Bright Moon Knight had already retreated to the top of the hill. The hillside they had passed, whether it was the trees or the rocks, had all been flattened. The light around them, the tusks, and the spikes seemed to tear the moonlight into pieces. Amon steadily climbed to the highest point, and looked down at the assassin with a powerful pressure. Although the opponent was strong, and his speed and reaction were even faster than Amon's, he was not a match for him in a head-on fight. Amon was confident that he could capture him on the spot. But at this moment, Bright Moon Knight suddenly let out a long howl. The moonlight trembled in the howl, and Amon watched helplessly as he underwent an astonishing transformation. Bright Moon Knight's body made a series of crisp sounds as his joints swelled, and he grew more than 2 feet taller. His clothes were torn, and his eyes flashed with a fierce and strange green light. His appearance was changing. His facial features protruded, and his mouth was full of sharp fangs. His arms were also extending. Beneath his torn clothes, one could see his muscles pulsating like countless snakes. His skin had turned ashen, and was covered with a layer of strange velvet. He didn't look like a human at all, but like a giant ape walking on 2 legs. No, he was more like a wolf that had stood up. Powerful strength filled the air in an instant, bringing with it an incomparably violent aura. Even with Amon's strong will, he could not help but be shocked at this moment. The tusks in his hands stabbed forward fiercely with a roar that struck the soul. Bright Moon Knight's body suddenly changed, and he entered a frenzied state. Amon was no longer confident that he could capture him alive, so he would kill him on the spot. At this moment, he thought of John. John had once inadvertently awakened the violent restless power, but he could not suppress the impulse brought about by the power. It was only under Amon's guidance that he was able to fuse it with his body and mind. If Hardedef didn't encounter Amon, and continued cultivating that manic power, and if he was lucky enough to survive or receive another guidance, would he end up the same as this assassin? Amon was not clear about this, but he felt that the aura that suddenly erupted from Bright Moon Knight was a little familiar. The frenzied Bright Moon Knight let out a loud roar, and 5 sharp claws stretched out from the tip of his hairy hand, holding the sharp spikes and smashing them against the tusks. Since the start of the fight, this was the first time their weapons had directly collided. The sound was like 2 metal hills colliding, and the huge roar shook the surrounding stones into pieces. Amon took 2 steps back, feeling that half of his body was a little numb, and the tusks in his hand were still trembling violently, making a wailing sound. For a moment, he was almost unable to hold it steadily. What a powerful and explosive impact this was! Amon was already in such a state, and Bright Moon Knight was not any better. His hand holding the sharp spikes trembled uncontrollably, and he took a few steps back. Suddenly, he threw away his weapon and pounced forward. He had obviously entered a ferocious state. His figure flashed, and the sharp claws flashing with cold light were already in front of him. This speed was even faster than the Enkidu that Amon had seen before. Amon did not have time to use any other means. He took a step back, let go of the tusks, and punched forward. The scene was like 2 strong men fighting on the street. The fist with a golden light smashed against the sharp claws, but the sharp claws were strangely bent and did not break. There was a loud bang. Bright Moon Knight let out a low roar of pain from his throat, and swung his other sharp claws. Amon dodged and reached out to grab his wrist, but he caught nothing. The opponent's reaction speed was too fast. Bright Moon Knight flashed like a whirlwind, and actually dashed behind Amon. Amon turned around and punched again with surging strength, and the two continued to fight. Ming had never encountered such an opponent, whose speed was as fast as a ghost's shadow, and whose explosive power was so violent. In a head-on fight, he could only fight with the explosive power of energy, and had no time to use other means. Amon could not help but be secretly shocked. According to John's previous experience, when this person entered a berserk state, not only could he greatly increase his speed and explosive power in a short period of time, but the pain he suffered could also stimulate his ferocity. This assassin had also changed his shape. It was unknown whether he was a wolf demon, or a strange transformation magic, or perhaps it was the result of cultivating that violent power to a certain extent. This kind of violent state could not be maintained for a long time, and if it was overused, it could hurt himself. But Amon was not interested in testing how long Bright Moon Knight could last. He heard the general growl, "Do you think I can't?" The joints all over Amon's body emitted crisp sounds, and his muscles were throbbing. Although his physique did not change, the feeling he exuded had changed. A stronger and more manic aura spread out. Amon had once told John that he had gone the wrong way and needed guidance. There might be several right paths, but no one could count the wrong ones. Amon had witnessed John's violent power, and knew how to erupt after it fused with the body and mind. At this moment, he was using it. Chapter 194. 178, What is a Spirit? The ferocious Bright Moon Knight leaped up from the ground and grabbed Amon's arm. His sharp claws tore open his clothes and tore several holes in the snake scale armor inside. Amon punched him in the shoulder. The transformed Bright Moon Knight was able to take the punch head-on. He let out a roar of pain and lowered his head to bite Amon's hand. Amon swung his arm to evade the attack, and flicked his finger against the opponent's chin. The strength of this flick was enough to shatter a tough boulder. Even an ordinary beast would have its head smashed to a pulp. With a crack, Bright Moon Knight's chin was dislocated. He was still able to use his incredibly fast reflexes to fall back and roll into the water. The water surged up, but as if it was suddenly flattened by a giant hand, it strangely returned to calm. His breath had disappeared in the mud at the bottom of the water. Amon did not chase into the water where the strange trees grew. He stood at the edge of the water, and a series of crisp sounds came from all the joints of his body, and the pervasive manic breath also slowly disappeared. Amon could also use a similar berserk power, which he had learned from John's experience, but he had never used it before. Although that berserk state could increase speed and explosive power, it also had an obvious flaw, which was that it could make people ferocious and even lose their minds. Since Amon could control it, it naturally wouldn't cause him to lose his mind. However, it would also affect the subtle senses of detection divine arts, and limit the usage of magic in a wide range. Thus, he could only use astonishing amounts of energy to fight, and could easily injure his own allies in battle. When he faced Enkidu on the battlefield, he was not as strong as he was today, and he did not understand how to master and control this state. Today, he encountered such a difficult opponent, so he decided to fight back with a tooth for a tooth. Bright Moon Knight clearly understood the characteristics of this berserk state, and knew that Amon's state would affect the senses of detection magic, so he dived into the water to hide his tracks when he escaped. With Bright Moon Knight's speed, he might have escaped far away and hidden in such a short time. Amon sighed inwardly. It was very difficult to ferret out this assassin in this charcoal marsh. If only El Mar was here. With the Ironback King on the side, Ming Yuyi would not have been able to escape just now. Just as he was thinking about this, Amon's eyebrows suddenly twitched as if he had sensed something. He raised his head and shouted, "Who's there?" The low voice traveled far in the night sky, and a person replied in mid-air, "God, it's me." Amon frowned. "John, didn't I tell you to wait with Link at the edge of the swamp? How did you get in?" John landed on the hillside, put away the shuttle and saluted. "Link and I built a fortress checkpoint on the edge of the charcoal forest according to your instructions. You should have arrived by now, but I didn't see you coming out of the swamp, so I came to meet you." Just now, he had heard the sounds of battle from afar, and had hurried over. What's going on here? Is there an army battle?" The hillside was a mess, the trees and Luan's stones had all been flattened. Who could have caused such a big commotion? Amon shook his head and said, "I said within a month. 3 days later, it's only a month. I rested for 3 days on the road, so I'm a little slower than expected. As for this place, of course, it's impossible for an army to have been here. It's just an assassin." John was taken aback. He drew his sword and looked around. "Where's the assassin? How dare they try to assassinate you?" Amon waved his hand and said, "There's no need to look for him, he's already escaped with his injuries. This man is indeed courageous, claiming to be the king of assassins in the continent. You've come just in time, I was just about to talk to you about the situation with this assassin." Amon then narrated the assassination to John. After listening, John sucked in a breath of cold air and said, "This man is very powerful. It's a pity that he met you, Amon. This time, he suffered a great loss. I reckon he won't be able to see his face for at least a few months." Amon replied with an, "Oh," and said, "He tried to ambush me twice but failed. Afterwards, he fought me with all his might." The feeling of that berserk state was very familiar. "The first thing I thought of was you." John blinked and said, "Are you trying to say, that if I didn't receive your guidance back then, I wouldn't be able to control that berserk power? If I continued to train, I would become like him?" Amon lightly shook his head. "No, if you can't control it, you'll eventually lose your mind. It's hard to say if you can even survive, let alone continue to train to such a high level. I think this man is similar to you back then. His berserk power was also awakened, but he received another kind of guidance." John furrowed his brows. "What kind of guidance?" Amon solemnly said, "It's to teach him how to control and utilize this power, making it stronger and stronger, while maintaining a calm and clear-headed state. This man's path is different from yours. He specializes in pursuing this power. When he reaches a certain level, he can even change his form." John's brows furrowed tightly. Who could guide him to train in such a way? Amon thought for a moment, and suddenly sneered, "I've learned something from your experience. I can also enter that berserk state, restricting other abilities, and greatly increase my speed and explosive power for a short period of time. This is something I can only do after attaining the 9th level of eternal vitality. But this man specializes in training in such a way. the person who can guide him to do so will certainly not be inferior to the current me. That assassin claimed to be an emissary of God. I'm guessing that he was most likely sent by Enrol, and the one who guided him should also be Enrol. John asked in puzzlement, why would Enrol guide him to train in this kind of power that will eventually turn him into a monster? Amon retorted, what do you think? John suddenly slapped his thigh and said, I understand now. Enrol guided Bright Moon Knight not so that he could one day become a true god, but to train a terrible killer. Amon nodded and said, back then, Tiamat of the Anunnaki divine clan guided 9 powerful monsters, and her purpose might be the same. But I know the Scorpion King and the Lion King, and they still train in the true power of origin. Tiamat taught them this, but only let them train on their own, and did not give them any hint to truly transcend eternal life. But in the end, this path still leads to the right end. But what Enrol did was even more extreme. He only guided Bright Moon Knight on how to control and train that violent power, and trained him into a terrifying monster killer. In fact, I can also do this now, but since I'm guiding my disciples, no matter how talented they are, I have to point out where the path leads to, and not an unknown path. John sighed, Amon, it's fortunate that I met you. Even thinking about it now, I'm still afraid. Based on my personal experience, I can infer that Bright Moon Knight might have even enjoyed this guidance. Amon also sighed, yes, perhaps he didn't think of it as a path, because there was indeed an unexpected gain. You just said that he won't be seen for at least a few months, how can you be so sure of that? John smiled, I've experienced it myself, so of course I know. Although I'm not sure why he transformed, but excessive use of that violent power will make him very weak afterwards. He fought with you for so long, and tormented this mountain to this extent, but was still defeated in the end. Furthermore, his shoulder and jaw were dislocated by you. Once he recovers from his berserk state, he will feel double the pain and weakness. If it were me, I would need at least half a year to fully recover. He was already very lucky to be able to escape with his life. Amon heaved a sigh of relief, it seems like he can't attack without limits, or else it would be too terrifying. Actually, I feel that the most dangerous aspect of him isn't that violent transformation, but the sudden assassination when he's calm. Hardadef laughed out loud, as he looked up at the full moon in the sky. Oh God, this place is far away from human habitation. That's why he could unleash his berserk strength without fear. Otherwise, how could an assassin create such a huge ruckus, and transform into a monster in public? And today, he's at his strongest, yet he's still no match for you, so he's revealed his secret method. You can also use that power, but after all, you can't just awaken it and cultivate it. I have more experience in this. It's a kind of uncontrollable restlessness, like a strong lust that changes with the environment. It's strongest when the moon is at its fullest. Amon narrowed his eyes, it seems that he'll be hiding for a long time. This charcoal marsh isn't a good place to recuperate. At this moment, a cloud drifted across the sky, blocking the moonlight. Darkness enveloped the marsh, and the wind picked up. Rustling sounds came from all directions, as if there were countless unseen dangers lurking, and the jungle appeared very gloomy. John said, "Where's Elmar?" If the assassin hasn't escaped far, Elmar might be able to find him. Now is when he's at his weakest. Amon said, "Speaking of Elmar, I'm a little worried. I don't know how badly the assassin's injuries are. Looking at his speed when he escaped, he might be able to hold on. This person's sneak attacks are impossible to guard against, and when he's at his strongest, none of you are a match for him. Elmar has exhausted his strength and is resting to recover, with only Raphael by his side to protect him. Since you're here, go do one thing, drive the shuttle to Elmar immediately and remind Raphael to be more careful. When Elmar recovers, the three of you will walk out of this road together, and make sure no one is left alone. If Elmar can find traces of Bright Moon Knight on the road, work together to take him down." The young Supreme Mage Raphael stayed on a hill in the forest of the marsh to rest, protecting the exhausted Ironback King Elmarch. When Elmar meditated, he always bent his tail and lay on his stomach. There were only the two of them in the boundless marsh, and they chatted when they had nothing to do. Elmar had never been to places outside the Euphrates Valley and the plains of Duk, and like Link back then, he was very curious about all kinds of things in the prosperous world outside. Raphael was born of a great noble family, had received the best education on the continent, and had experienced many things under the tutelage of Goliath. Elmar was very interested in everything he said, and whenever he was free, he would pester Raphael to tell him stories. When he was with Amon, Elmar did not dare to do this, because he was in awe of Amon like a god, and naturally it was not good for him to pry, but in front of Raphael, he was much more casual. Raphael was very well-mannered and patient, and no matter what childish and ridiculous questions Elmar asked him, he would answer them in detail, sometimes like coaxing a child. The conversation between the two was not through words, but through the use of a method similar to message magic to communicate in the soul. After Amon left, it rained in the marsh for 2 days, and on the third night it finally cleared up. The soft moonlight sprinkled on the hillside, and there were still drops of water hanging between the grass and leaves. Elmar lay on the edge of the tent and sighed, "What a beautiful moonlight, dimly illuminating. It's strange, I've seen the moon so many times in the mountains before, but I've never had this feeling, never found its beauty." Raphael sat in the tent and laughed, "I didn't expect an ironback to admire the moon. Is this because you've gained intelligence? I'm very curious about your situation, can you tell me what it feels like to gain intelligence? How is it different from the ironback in the past?" Elmar replied with some embarrassment, "If I tell you, don't laugh at me." Raphael narrowed his eyes and put on a straight face, "Okay, I won't laugh." Elmar looked at the moon and replied in a trance, "At first, I was an ironback, but later I became different from other ironbacks. I don't know how it happened, but in short, I became stronger, more powerful, and had magical instincts. Now that I think about it, what people call gaining intelligence, for me, was probably fantasy." Raphael asked puzzledly, "Fantasy?" Elmar replied shyly, "Yes, I learned to fantasize." An ironback can fantasize for no reason, isn't it ridiculous? I don't know when, but I became aware of my own existence, and understood what I had, and how I was different from other ironbacks. Raphael said, "The soul has self-awareness? Is this the awakening of intelligence?" Elmar shook her head gently, "You can't say that. Other creatures in the world, including the ironbacks, have self-awareness, but the awakening of intelligence is more special. From then on, I would fantasize about things that I couldn't get, things that I couldn't have as an ironback. For instance, I see birds flying by in a pool, and I wonder, will I be able to fly someday? What would it feel like if I could fly like a bird?" Raphael, you learned to think? Elmar, at the time, it couldn't be called thinking. There were just some simple thoughts in my mind, and I couldn't think of the meaning of words to organize these thoughts like now. It was just a fantasy beyond my actual existence. How to describe it? It's like they say daydreaming. Raphael, how did it feel to learn to fantasize? Elmar blinked and said, "It felt very good, it was a joy I had never experienced before. For example, I fantasized about flying like a bird, not because I could really fly, but because I imagined myself flying." Raphael asked with interest, "At that time, did you find yourself changing?" Elmar, I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back now, I was indeed changing. The ironbacks inhabit the bed by the water. As long as they can live comfortably and have enough to eat every day, they won't do anything else. But I'm different. I make my bed more and more spacious, to the point where it's not necessary to rest. I also like to collect some things to decorate my bed. This is something that other ironback beasts wouldn't do at all. There are also some habits that have changed. I found pleasure in instinctive behavior and separated it from instinct. For example, after an ironback is full, it won't look for food again, and an ironback as big as me will sometimes hunt some animals in the forest. With my ability, I don't have to worry about not having enough to eat in the forest, but sometimes I find it more fun to chase prey than to catch it. So when I'm bored, I'll also chase prey, beyond the need for pure eating. I just think it's fun. I heard you say that the nobles in the human world also hunt, but they don't do it because they lack food. This is similar to my situation, isn't it? Raphael sighed. You mean the hunting of the nobles? They are indeed not hunters for a living, it's just a kind of fun. If this is the case with intelligence, it's actually a double-edged sword. It's unknown whether it's a blessing or a curse. You didn't know the meaning of hunting at that time, you just experienced the fun of chasing. If you indulge yourself unrestricted and even run to the human world, you will be regarded as a terrible monster or demon. I was ordered to destroy such monsters. They attacked villages in the Hittite kingdom. Elmar shivered in fright. Fortunately, I only met you now. Raphael said slightly apologetically, I won't interrupt you, please continue. Elmar lowered her head and said, I have nothing to say, I want to hear it from you. Raphael turned his head and said, What do you want to hear me say? Elmar whispered, It's the situation I just mentioned, what do you think? People are more imaginative than ironbacks, and they are born to do the same behavior as monsters or demons. What do you think? Among the people I know, apart from Amon, you are the most knowledgeable, please tell me, okay? Raphael also looked up at the moon and said, Scholars in the human world often discuss this issue. Some people think that fantasy is one of the origins of human beings, because it always transcends the reality of one's own situation. Just like an ironback, it wishes it could fly like a bird. Its meaning and pleasure is not in flying itself, but in the hope of flying. So people need gods in their hearts, and it is precisely the existence of this kind of god that the glory of the gods can shine into people's hearts. Elmar blinked and asked, Where did you learn all this? Raphael smiled slightly. Of course it's the Hittite Academy of Magic. I received all kinds of training there since I was a child, and my teacher Goliath is now the chief honorary elder there. Elmar said in an admiring tone, I won't interrupt you, please continue. Raphael continued, Someone once said that fantasies always surpass reality. It's not that you fantasize because you can get it, but because you know you can't get it, so you have expectations. Just like how you know you can't fly, but you hope you can. An ironback will not imagine that he can crawl in a swamp, because you can. Some people are immersed in daydreams to experience the joy of dreams, and some people are constantly approaching their dreams. This is the change in the human world since ancient times. Many people think that, having whatever they want is the greatest joy in the world, but if they can really get what they want, they don't care about happiness. Chapter 195. Raphael explained, It's really not easy to understand, because many people don't know the difference between fantasy, ideal, and delusion. My teacher Goliath taught me to personally verify the truth, and I can tell you about my feelings. Powerless civilians often fantasize about becoming an emperor, which is not impossible, because there are emperors in the world. But if everyone thinks so, it is a delusion rather than an ideal. The real ideal is whether you can become an emperor or not. When you have such a thought, you have to realize what is the master in your heart. I have seen many kings, countless kings in the delusion of civilians, and in their hearts, they may not be as happy as you, the ironback, but they also have their own fantasies, and the original human nature will not change because of status. Raphael was silent for a moment at this point, looking down at Elmarch. Seeing that the ironback had been silently thinking about something, he suddenly asked, Elmar, why are you asking me this today? Elmar seemed to wake up from a dream and replied, Because Ammonius told me that my accumulation of training has long been enough and I have passed many tests, but if I want to achieve the 7th level and integrate body and mind, it may be very simple or difficult for me, and I need a kind of enlightened guidance, like opening my eyes and seeing the light. The person who can guide me to open my eyes may not necessarily be him. Raphael asked again, When did Ammon tell you this? Elmar, on the way here a few days ago, when you were following behind, he whispered to me, so I want to ask you today, please tell me your understanding and feelings. Raphael's expression became serious. My teacher Goliath once asked me a question, what is the greatest delusion of mortals? Elmar blurted out, of course it is to become a godlike existence. Raphael nodded and said, yes, that is the answer. For the vast majority of people, this was just a delusion, but gods did exist. So what is the true meaning of human nature containing divinity? We live in the world around us and also in our own thoughts. Don't look at life according to your desires. Your ideal is your path. What kind of life you are depends on how you look at life. It's meaningless to only think about becoming a godlike existence. The real meaningful question is how a god becomes a god. Raphael looked at the moon and was explaining when he suddenly heard Elmar say, "Thank you for enlightening me by listening to your voice." Raphael replied casually, "You're welcome. These are the teachings of my teachers, and I'm personally seeking to verify their meaning. Today, I'm just telling you my understanding." Why did your voice change? As he spoke, Raphael suddenly realized that something was wrong with Elmar's voice. She was no longer communicating through their souls. Instead, she was speaking directly into his ear. Moreover, her voice had become a gentle woman's voice. Listening to it was very comfortable. He immediately turned his head and looked over. For a moment, he was stunned. When he reacted, his face turned red. He quickly lowered his head and whispered, You aren't wearing any clothes." The huge iron back was gone, and a slim woman was sitting in the moonlight. She was about 20 years old, with long golden brown hair. Her face was very beautiful, even a bit enchanting. Her cheekbones were slightly high, her lips were slightly thick, and her eyes were slightly deep. However, her facial features had a unique charm. She was a beautiful woman with an exquisite figure. What's more, she was not wearing a single piece of clothing at the moment. Her figure under the moonlight showed the most primitive and natural beauty. Hearing Raphael's words, the woman suddenly reacted and said in a shy tone, "I forgot, I didn't pay attention for a moment." She stood up, turned around, put on a very common linen dress, and said, "Put on your clothes, I didn't scare you, did I?" This woman, of course, was none other than Elmar in human form. She was indeed inexperienced, it was the first time in her life, and even she felt it was very sudden. Raphael turned his head to look again, and quickly turned his head back and said, "This dress of yours, to ordinary people, looks flawless, but in the face of supreme message magic, it's still equivalent to wearing nothing." Elmar, however, asked, "Equivalent to wearing nothing? You deliberately peeped at me. You are a supreme mage, of course, you know supreme message magic. In the face of brilliant detection magic, does it make a difference whether ordinary people wear clothes or not? You know what you're hiding." The supreme mage Raphael, who had been talking with confidence and composure just now, was a little stammering at this moment. I didn't. I'm just reminding you that detection magic detects objects, that is different from this situation. Your clothes are just a disguise of message magic, and you still have to use your magic power at all times. Sorry, I forgot that you didn't bring any clothes with you. Elmar's face also turned red, but fortunately, the moonlight couldn't see too clearly. She turned and said, "Look again, what about now?" Raphael turned his head cautiously to take a look and exclaimed slightly, "It's a suit of armor." He saw that under the illusory linen robe on Elmar's body, there was another close-fitting dark golden soft armor. Elmar smiled and said, "Have you forgotten? I am an ironback, and transforming into this armor is an innate ability. It is very useful in battle, and can be worn as clothes at ordinary times." Raphael asked again, "How did your voice also change?" Elmar approached the tent and sat beside Raphael, explaining a little embarrassedly, "I've never spoken before, don't you think that the voice I used to communicate with you was a bit similar to that of Link and Ammonius?" "That was just using message magic to imitate my familiar voice, now what you hear is my own voice, does it sound good?" Raphael nodded and said, "It sounds good." Elmar, "Really good or not good?" Raphael replied seriously, "It sounds good." "Is this the first time you've changed like this?" Elmar looked at the moon and let out a long breath. I didn't change like this, I am like this now. If there is any difference between me and an iron back, it is the difference. After many years of training to this point, it is like the metamorphosis of those insects in the mountains. Ammonius said that it may be difficult or easy for me to take this step, and now I finally understand. No wonder he wanted me to exhaust my strength and asked you to stay to protect me. It turns out that Ammonius had already expected it. So I want to thank you, it was you who taught me. Raphael touched his chin a little embarrassedly. Don't say that, that is because you have accumulated enough training. At this moment, it is like opening a window gently and seeing the light, and when you look back, it suddenly dawned on you that the moon has always been there. Elmar murmured to herself, yes, the moon has always been there, it turns out to be so beautiful, it feels so good. As she spoke, she couldn't help but lean on Raphael's shoulder. As a mutant ironback, her body was very sensitive, and she immediately asked, Raphael, half of your body suddenly tightened, as if you had found an enemy, did I make you so nervous? Raphael hurriedly explained, no, it's just that you suddenly became like this, I'm a little not used to it for a while. Elmar asked again, you don't like me being close to you? Raphael, no. Elmar, then why do you react as if you are secretly on guard? Raphael was sweating from her questions and explained repeatedly, the body's reaction is indeed similar, but the situation is different. Many of people's habits and reactions are very complicated, and you still need to learn to experience and differentiate. I am nervous not because I don't like you sitting here. Elmar, but I always feel that you are a little strange now, different from a few days ago. Raphael said helplessly, you are also different from a few days ago. Before his voice fell, the young supreme mage suddenly paused, and the muscles all over his body tightened imperceptibly. Elmar said with some grievance, you clearly don't like it, this is the reaction when there is danger, am I in danger to you? Raphael didn't speak, but said in his soul, be careful, the magic array seemed to have sensed something just now, the power of the activation is very weak, is someone spying on us in the dark? Elmar was taken aback and immediately communicated through message magic, there really is an enemy? Why didn't I feel it? No, my reaction is more sensitive than yours. Raphael, I am running a magic array, which Amon set up before he left, the detection range covers the surrounding swamp, of course it is a little stronger than your natural senses. There was indeed a fluctuation just now, very weak, but with magic, I shouldn't have been mistaken. Elmar, could it be a mutant monster in the swamp that accidentally passed by? Raphael frowned and said, maybe, but it's better to be careful. Elmar smiled. Don't be afraid, I am the king of the swamp, if you encounter any enemies here, I can protect you. Raphael smiled bitterly and said, king of the swamp? No, you should be the goddess of the swamp, the guardian goddess of the charcoal marsh. Looking at you now, I wouldn't be surprised if people call you that in the legends of the future. I am the one protecting you now, your power has not recovered yet. Elmar shook her arm. I recover a lot faster, this is also a kind of talent. Raphael, your physical strength has recovered, but your magic recovery can't be so fast, this has nothing to do with talent, you still need to rest for a while and continue on your way to be safe. As he said this, he suddenly stood up and pulled out his staff, looked up and shouted, who is it? It's me, John. Ammonius asked me to come. An answer came from mid-air. John put away the shuttle before he landed and jumped in front of the tent, then froze. Raphael, where did Elmar go? And this lady is? Elmar stood up and pulled Raphael's sleeve, blinked and said, I am the goddess of the swamp, the legendary guardian goddess of the charcoal marsh, don't you know me? John scratched his head. What legend, why haven't I heard of it? Elmar replied with a smile, the legend that Raphael just talked about, those legends in the human world, maybe this is how they spread. John looked at her for a long time, then frowned and asked Raphael, Ammonius asked you to protect Elmar here, and also asked me to come over, but you are with this woman. Where is Elmar? Why aren't you protecting her? Elmar interjected, Elmar is here, John, try to find her. John was a little puzzled and could only stare at Raphael. Raphael signaled with his eyes and quietly pointed to the woman beside him. John suddenly realized something, his jaw almost dropped, and his eyes widened. It took him a long time to react and said, "El-Mar. Is it really you?" El-Mar stood there and twisted her body. "It's me, you just recognized me." John rubbed his eyes. "I didn't recognize you at all, it was just a guess. You really are the goddess of the swamp." In the blink of an eye, the ironback became a great beauty. El-Mar giggled and looked very happy. John and Raphael both looked at her and laughed. After laughing, El-Mar asked, "John, why are you here? What's the matter with Ammonius?" John rubbed his eyes again and nodded. "Of course there's something. A monster tried to assassinate Ammonius on the way, but was injured by Ammonius and escaped into the swamp. Ammonius was afraid that it was not safe here, so he specially sent me here." Raphael and El-Mar were both surprised. Raphael said, "This person is very capable, he could actually escape from Ammon." El-Mar shouted, "This person is very bold, he dared to assassinate Ammonius." John explained, "This person's origin is indeed not simple, but he should be at his weakest now, and will not be a threat for the time being, but Ammonius is still worried. Sit down and talk, I will tell you the details." El-Mar, seeing you like this, I'm really not used to it, I almost forgot why I came here. 3 days later, Ammon finally walked out of the charcoal marsh, the winding path stretching from the southernmost end of the marsh to the eastern edge, with the exit closest to the city of Salem. Link and Aesop were waiting here, and now there were wanderers from all over the continent in the city of Salem, as well as cavemen from various tribes in the mountains, as well as some highland giants who had migrated to the plains. Aesop chose the strongest craftsmen among them to build a checkpoint here. Ammon wanted to open up a trade route, but he also did not want anyone to invade Salem through this road, so he built a fortress at the end of this long and narrow road. Not only could it be used as a rest and supply station for caravans coming and going, but the terrain here was perfect for garrisoning troops. Half of the walls of the fortress extended into the swamp, dug deep into the mud until the rock strata, and then stacked with boulders, and only half of the walls were built. When Ammon walked through the gate, the craftsmen of Salem were busy, and when they heard that he was coming, they all put down what they were doing and knelt down in the open space. The scene was grand and spectacular, which made Ammon feel slightly embarrassed. Although he had been worshipped as a god as early as in the cavemen tribes, after getting along for a long time, everyone was not so exaggerated. Then he realized that Link had built a shrine in the city of Salem, and the statues on the altar were him and Murin. In the minds of the people of Salem, he was not equivalent to a god, but a god. Now that a living man like Ammon suddenly walked in front of them, for these people, it was like a god showing a miracle. What kind of miracle did Ammonius show? Alone in the impassable charcoal marsh, he opened up such a long and winding road, which was far beyond the imagination of the average person. It was a miracle. Ammon waved his hand gently, and countless soft white curtains of light fell from mid-air, gently sprinkling on the crowd. This was an advanced magic, capable of eliminating fatigue and pain, making people feel refreshed and carefree, and could be performed by advanced mages. But Ammon did not use his staff, and his magic power was strong, and the range of the magic was very large. For the crowd, this was a blessing from the gods. Everyone knelt on the ground and prayed, not even daring to breathe. Ammon could feel the thoughts of these people in front of him. They were very focused and sincere, and they were very tired from their work, so it was natural for them to perform the magic. In front of him, Aesop and Link also bowed to the ground with a smile, as if they had expected this scene. Behind the crowd, 2 people stood far away, and at this moment, they looked so dazzling to the eye. One of them bowed with a staff in his hand, and his expression was a little strange. It was the high priest of the temple of Isis, George. The other person stood straight with his hand on the hilt of his sword, looking at Ammon with an expressionless face. His posture was tall and straight, his face beautiful, and his whole body exuded an indescribable majesty. It was the supreme warrior Gabriel. Ammon felt a little bitter in his heart. He had met an unexpected assassin in the marsh, and the person who was really supposed to assassinate him was waiting here. Goliath had already said that the pursuers sent by the Empire of Igut were George and Gabriel, and they were the last people he wanted to make an enemy of. What should come could not be avoided, and this was like facing fate sooner or later, so Ammon could only sigh and walk over. The people who were bowing to the ground heard the voice of Ammonius in their souls. The road through the charcoal marsh has been opened, and the official trade route will arrive here in 2 months. You have all worked hard to build your homes, and the faith in your hearts is a true blessing, so continue to work. Ammon quietly ordered Aesop to lead the craftsmen to continue with their work, and asked Link to follow him. The crowd got up, lowered their heads, and slowly dispersed with a look of awe. Link followed behind and said quietly, "These two came to Salem to find you, and then heard that you would be here, so they came to wait for you. I know they are your friends and benefactors, but I also heard that the pursuers sent by the Empire of Igut are." Ammon interrupted him, "I know all about it, and I will take care of it. They are guests of Salem, and we cannot neglect them." Link, "Of course I know that, and I have been receiving them carefully and well. If they want to come, let them come. Your 3 personal guards are lying in ambush in the house next door, and I will be by your side, so there will be no problem." Ammon waved his hand and said, "There is no need to let others interfere, I will take care of my own business. Let's find a place where there is no one to talk first." As he spoke, he had already walked across the open space to the front, and Ammon bowed and said, "My lords, long time no see, it must have been a long journey. I am really sorry that you had to travel so far because of me." To be continued. Chapter 196. 180, The Eye of Sealing versus the Blade of Order. George smiled bitterly. "The people here call you Ammonius, and you are like a god. I have been to the city of Salem and saw the scene just now with my own eyes, and everything here can indeed be called a miracle, amazing." Gabriel, however, did not bother with pleasantries and said expressionlessly, "Ammon, you should know why we are here." Ammon replied, "I know why you two are here. You are here on orders from the Empire of Igut to hunt me down. Let's find a convenient place to talk, there are too many people here, it's not good to catch up." Continuing forward, the plains of Duk was currently surrounded by wilderness, and the few of them were silent along the way, until they finally arrived at an uninhabited valley surrounded by hills. Ammon stopped and waved his hand, placing down a golden-roofed tent out of thin air. Tables, chairs, and wine were set up in the tent, and he sat down and said, "Lord George, Lord Gabriel, whatever it is, please sit down first, and let me offer you a toast." When Ammon first arrived in Igut, he was still a commoner from a foreign land, and Gabriel had saved him and George had helped him. When he left Igut, he was already a supreme general whose power shook the world, and both Gabriel and George were once his subordinates and had obeyed his orders on the battlefield. Now that he was offering this toast, Ammon's status was still that of the supreme general of the empire, and he had not been publicly dismissed. George raised his glass and drank slowly, and since the moment he saw Ammon, the supreme mage had been smiling bitterly. Gabriel grabbed the glass and drank it in one gulp, then stood up and said, "Ammon, now that you know why I am here, let's not waste any more time. Now, as a supreme warrior, I formally request a duel with you." Duel? Ammon wanted to laugh when he heard this. He had already had 2 duels along the way, first with Yugala the Lion King in the desert, and then with Elmar and Celia and her summoned beast Rulio by the swamp. He did not expect that there would be a 3rd duel after entering the plains of Duk, and that the opponent would be his savior, Gabriel. Ammon put down his glass, stood up, and reminded, "Your mission is to kill me, and a surprise attack and assassination are still possible, but if it is a head-on fight, you have little chance, so why settle it with a duel?" George and Link frowned, and Ammon actually said this, as if he was reminding Gabriel what to do if he wanted to kill him, and was also tactfully telling Gabriel that both of them should be prepared before fighting, and that she was not his match. Gabriel said solemnly, "Supreme General Ammon, I am well aware of your contributions to Igut, and the Empire of Igut has not publicly condemned you for your crimes, only ordered me to assassinate you. Then I can only ask another warrior for a duel as a warrior. High Priest George, can I do this? George nodded and replied, of course, and for you, it seems to be the only thing you can do. Amon asked again, Honorable Supreme Warrior, if it is a duel, the other party's consent is required, what if I don't agree? Gabriel replied, Amon, I saved you, and I don't ask you to repay me, I just want you to help me get out of this predicament and agree to the duel. Amon nodded slowly, I can't refuse when you say that, okay, I accept your request for a duel. Since it is a duel, there must be a duel agreement. Who do you want to be the arbitrator, and what agreement do you want to make? Gabriel, I ask the Supreme Mage George and this Mr. Link to be the arbitrator together. There is no special agreement, just deal with it according to the results of the duel between the warriors of the two opposing sides at the time of the battle, and abide by noble etiquette. Gabriel did not ask for a private duel among the people, but to deal with it according to the duel between the warriors of the two opposing sides. The victorious party could kill the loser, and if they did not kill their opponent, then the loser would be a prisoner of war, and the country or city-state to which they belonged could redeem him. This was not an explicit law, but a kind of noble etiquette in the various countries of the continent. Amon looked at Gabriel with a rather helpless expression and nodded again, well, as you wish. Gabriel bowed to Amon again, took out a cowhide envelope from his bosom and handed it over. Before the duel begins, according to the instructions of the adoratress, I will give this letter to you, please read it before you fight. Amon hurriedly reached out and took the letter. Since Gabriel had accepted the mission to assassinate him, it was impossible for Maria not to tell him something. Amon had always wanted to ask but could not bring himself to say it, so there was such a letter. He opened the envelope and took out a piece of straw paper, glanced at it, and could not help but be slightly startled, then put the letter back and carefully put it into his bosom. Gabriel did not ask him what was written in the letter, but just asked, have you finished reading it? Amon replied very calmly, I have, when do you want to duel with me? Gabriel untied the long sword at his waist and put it on the table, then reached out to George. George sighed, took out a silver battle-axe from his spatial artifact and handed it to her. The battle-axe was like a half-moon, exuding a bright silver-white light. There seemed to be flowing patterns on its surface, as if there were wisps of electric light flowing on it. They were not engraved lines, but strange reflections of the surrounding space. Amon was slightly surprised. This was not an ordinary weapon, but also a magic artifact, and it seemed to be able to change with the body and mind. It could be called a holy artifact. In fact, this battle-axe was originally given to Gabriel by Amon, who had obtained it from the mysterious cave where Bear had fallen. The weapons that could be preserved in good condition there were all treasures on the continent. Gabriel had used this battle-axe to fight Enkidu, and there were many gaps and countless cracks on it, but she did not discard the weapon and used mithril to repair the damage. The so-called mithril was made from silver, but it had been specially processed by the mages to be able to conduct and stimulate the power. It was a precious material for processing weapons used by warriors. But to fuse it on the surface of a weapon, it needed to be refined by magic, not ordinary plating. The material of this battle-axe had undergone many powerful surges of power, and the material had also undergone wonderful changes. No matter how many times Gabriel fused and repaired it with mithril, the battle-axe always had traces of gaps and cracks on it, like marks that could not be erased. She couldn't repair this weapon. Even if she could fix its shape, when she waved it, there would always be uncontrollable cracks in the space between the silver hairs. The attack she launched was like a comb without teeth, there would always be an inexplicable lack of power. Before she accepted the task of hunting down Amon, she made a request to the adoratress, to gather all the power of the Temple of Isis and completely refine this weapon. Maria agreed, but the result was a little unbelievable. She summoned the masters of the Temple of Isis, and finally mobilized all the supreme mages to set up a magic array and put the battle-axe in the center of the magic array to be refined. Finally, even Maria herself, holding the adoratress' staff, completely repaired the gaps and cracks on the battle-axe, forming the flowing patterns. At this moment, Gabriel took out the battle-axe, and Amon scanned it with detection magic. He felt that the space on both sides of the blade seemed to be cut open by an invisible gap, dividing a line, and even the detection of magic seemed to be cut off. This was a holy object that could open up space, and if the user's magic was strong enough, the power of this weapon was incredible. Amon could not help but be secretly amazed. Gabriel walked into the valley with the battle axe in her hand, turned around and said, "Amon, please take out your weapon too, we will duel here and now." Link also vaguely sensed that the battle axe in her hand was unusual and advised, "Respected Supreme Warrior, Ammonius has just opened up a path in the charcoal marsh, and it took a month of continuous effort, it must be extremely exhausting. I think it's better to rest for a while before dueling." George also took advantage of the situation to advise, "Link is right, Ammonius is very tired from opening up a path in the marsh, and he needs to rest for a while. Let's duel when he fully recovers his physical strength and magic power." Both of them wanted to delay and did not want to see Gabriel and Amon really duel. Anyway, there was no harm in delaying. Gabriel looked at Amon and said, "The people here call you Ammonius, do you need to rest?" Amon smiled and asked meaningfully, "If you want to rest, then wait until your strength is restored before dueling. If you insist on dueling here and now, I will not object." Gabriel replied simply, "Then let's do it." Ammonius' expression was a little strange, and no one knew what he was thinking. He slowly walked into the valley and stood 10 steps away from Gabriel, and took out a weapon out of thin air. In the distance, George and Link were taken aback at the same time, because the weapon Amon took out was also very special. It was a thick and long broadsword with a wide hilt that looked like a slender cross. A crystal was embedded in the middle of the blade, translucent in the sunlight, with a thin line in the middle that looked like a cat's eye. Link recognized it. It was the staff of the cat goddess Batet, once a holy artifact that could change with the body and mind. Later, its broken remains were given to Link, and Link gave it to Amon. Amon crossed thousands of miles of the Saya Desert and then the vast charcoal marsh, and along the way, he actually completed the sacrificial refining and forged it into a sword. The sword looked heavy, but in Amon's hand, it was light as a feather, and when he swept it with detection magic, there seemed to be a kind of annihilating power, as if the aura it emitted could seal all kinds of senses. After Amon stood still, Gabriel asked, "Supreme General, are you ready?" Amon did not speak, just nodded, and Gabriel simply and neatly made her move. She raised her battle axe and charged forward, covering the distance of 10 steps in the blink of an eye, and slashed at Amon with a silver light. Amon turned sideways with his sword, avoiding the axe blade, and attacked Gabriel's arm. Gabriel did not withdraw her axe to dodge, but turned her body, and the axe spun in the air, slapping at the tip of Amon's sword. The battle axe and the tip of the sword collided with a clang and a sharp buzzing sound, and the two moved so fast that they had already switched positions and were fighting again. George and Link, who were watching the battle, were a little puzzled. They had thought that they would see an earth-shattering excitement, and George clenched his staff, ready to defend himself against the impact of the power, but the scene in front of him was very strange, even eerie. Gabriel's martial arts were first class, and she had learned all kinds of fighting skills since she was a child. Her diligence was beyond the imagination of ordinary people, and she had also carried out all kinds of dangerous tasks. Even if she was not a supreme warrior, she was still a master of fighting, and her skills in using various weapons were almost perfect. The combination of speed and strength was seamless, and her judgment was extremely accurate. There was no need to think, and the reaction in fighting was already an instinct. Amon had not undergone such systematic training in fighting skills, but Schrödinger was once the goddess Batet of the Ennead divine clan, and had experienced countless dangerous battles. Amon had unfolded her spiritual imprint and also inherited her fighting skills and experience, so he was not at a disadvantage in such a fight with Gabriel. Silver light and sword shadows crisscrossed, and the two figures were dazzling as they advanced and retreated, and their weapons occasionally clashed together, making a crisp clanging sound. But there was no diffuse light on the battlefield, nor was there an explosive impact of energy. This was not like a duel between two supreme warriors, but more like two masters of fighting competing in skills and experience, to see whether Amon's swordsmanship or Gabriel's battle axe was better. Link couldn't help but exclaim, "So that's how they want to fight, Supreme Mage George, do you see that? For a supreme mage like you, if such warriors get close to you, they can easily assassinate you." George nodded and said, "They are the top masters of fighting on the continent, and it is difficult for anyone to resist if they are caught off guard. But why don't they use the powerful strength of a supreme warrior?" Link shrugged. "How would I know? Have they discussed it?" Neither Amon nor Gabriel used their powerful superhuman strength, and they fought like two strong ordinary people. The grass and leaves in the valley were flying, and the battlefield had been trampled to the ground. But there was also an invisible danger in the fight, which came from the weapons in their hands. Amon could feel that the sharpness of Gabriel's battle axe could cut through almost everything. To describe the sharpness of a weapon, it usually depended on how hard the material was and how thin the edge could be. But this battle axe was different, it had the power to cut through space. No matter how tough the armor was, if the space it was in was cut through, it would lose its purpose of defense. The blade of the axe was like a strange division of order. Not to mention hard armors, it could even cut through flowing water. If it was used with the help of powerful magic power, it would be a truly unparalleled sharpness in the world. If Amon did not use additional magic defense, no matter how tough the snake scale armor he wore was, it would not be able to stop this axe. Gabriel also felt that the sword in Amon's hand was also very special, with an indescribable power of annihilation. No matter how powerful the attack of the weapon was, it was like a clay ox entering the sea in front of this sword, as if it was sealed, or the connection between the power and the attacker was cut off. The two fought for a long time, their shadows erratic in the sun. Although the weapons clashed many times, Amon did not let the blade of the opponent's battle axe directly hit the body of the sword, but only used the tip of the sword to divert the force. Amon's sword was very clever. If it was another warrior, the impact of the battle axe being hit by the tip of the sword would dislocate the joints of the entire arm. But Gabriel used his footwork and the inertia of the weapon to always resolve it in the most reasonable way. They fought from morning to afternoon, and the sun had changed the direction of its light. With the physical strength of the two supreme warriors, fighting like this could last for days and nights. It was just a matter of who would accidentally reveal a flaw first. Link finally saw some clues and said to George, "They are fighting like this because of the weapons in their hands. Gabriel's battle axe can cut through space, and the energy impact will always make a gap. And Amon's sword can annihilate power, and it can also cut through the energy impact and lose the traction, so they are simply competing with fighting skills." George frowned and said, "Weapons are indeed amazing. But even if it is a holy object, it needs enough power to exert its greatest power. I am afraid that the two of them are fighting like this not only because of the weapons, but perhaps there is another mystery." "Link, you mean I guessed wrong? But how long will it take for them to fight like this? In fact, you and I are very clear that if they really go all out in a duel, Gabriel is by no means a match for Ammonius." Before they finished speaking, there was a sudden change on the battlefield. There was a deafening sound of sword and axe colliding, and Amon's figure was shocked and flew dozens of feet away. The shock of the sound shattered all the utensils on the table, and rose-colored wine flowed all over the table. George exclaimed and raised his staff, and layers of various shields covered the golden tent. The scene of the battle suddenly changed. The silver axe in Gabriel's hand emitted thousands of rays of light, which seemed to leave no trace in the soil, but the trees that were swept by were silently broken, and the hard rocks were constantly sliding down, as if inexplicably separated from the mountain. Amon shouted, "Good, I've been waiting for you." The sword in his hand also turned into countless phantoms, and wherever it passed, the silver light would shatter. Gabriel strode forward and swung his axe. The silver axe had already turned into a flying arc of light, and even the shadows of the sword light could be cut open. The astonishing impact of the energy scattered, and it was no longer possible to distinguish the figures of the two outside the battlefield, and even the nearest small hill was flattened, turning into wriggling dust and falling down. At this moment, even if someone wanted to stop the duel between the two, it was probably impossible to intervene. The big tent was like a lone island on the edge of a stormy sea, suffering from all kinds of shocks from time to time, and even Link had to use magic to defend himself. Fortunately, the tent here was only the aftermath of the scattered energy, and George and Link could still sit still. From time to time, a silver light slashed down, shattering a layer of shield, but strangely appeared behind the tent. And from time to time, a sword light flew over, silently scattering the surrounding elemental shield. George clenched his staff, frowned and asked Link, "Can you see clearly how they are fighting?" Link also held his staff and shook his head, "I can't see clearly, even the detection magic is disrupted. How can we arbitrate like this?" George smiled bitterly, "Arbitrate what arbitrate? They don't need others to arbitrate, we are just putting on a show." You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.